This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate what if baby Naruto was turned into Bijuu hybrid because of Danzo. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. No wasting of my time. Let's start the story.
Any Cage would agree that the mountains of paperwork that Minato Namikaze sat at his desk were the bane of their existence. However, because his wife, Kushina Namikaze, was pregnant and nearing her due date, he was pressed for time. They discovered they were expecting a boy thanks to the miracles of medical jutsu. After reading his sensei's very first book, Minato made the decision to give the boy the name Naruto, after the main character made his sensei the godfather of Naruto. He finally finished for the day after an hour of reading, signing, and signing some more. In order to greet his beloved and unborn child, he hurried to the hospital room where Kushina was staying. Upon opening the door to her room, Minato inquired, "And how is my beautiful princess today?" Kushina began her fourth hospital meal in the same hour and remarked, "Your son is making me eat so much. I swear he is 90% stomach. But, I'm doing well nonetheless." Minato said, laughing, "Well, I'm glad you're feeling well today." But at that moment, things took a turn for the worse. "Lord Hokage, I have urgent news," exclaimed a man with silver hair that defied gravity, a ninja headband covering his left eye, and a mask covering the lower half of his face. Minato questioned, "What is it, Kakashi?" Whatever it wasn't good. The Anbu captain didn't react this strongly to many things. "The nine-tailed fox has appeared and is heading for the village. At the rate he is going, he will be here within a month," he yelled. Never in his life had Kakashi felt so afraid. With a single tail swing, the demon fox that could raise tsunamis, destroy mountains, and cause other catastrophic events was on his way to his house. Minato felt frightened. To say that he was afraid would be an understatement. Everyone was aware of the demon's strength. The nine-tailed fox was superior to the other demons. The eight-tailed bull was at least 10 times as strong as the fox. However, Minato had to maintain a cool and collected demeanor around everyone. After all, what chance did the ninja and villagers have if the Hokage was afraid? Minato feared the worst and said, "I see. Is there anything else?" Kakashi looked to the ground and said, "Yes, there is. I am terribly sorry, Kushina, but the Whirlpool village, it was completely destroyed by the fox's rampage." Despite her heartbreak, Kushina had to ask him, were there any survivors? Unable to deliver the terrible news to her, Kakashi could only shake his head. Kushina sobbed because it was the only thing she could do at the time. She wept bitterly over the loss of her entire village, her entire family, and her old friends. Right now, she couldn't feel worse. Kakashi said, "Lord Hokage, what shall we do?" He hoped his leader had a plan and would not mention his sensei. "I will look through the scrolls in the Hokage library and see if there isn't some form of jutsu that can stop the demon," said Minato. "I only hope I can find something in time." Kushina smiled slightly and said, "Minato-kun, please be careful. Naruto will need us one day." It had been a few days since Minato last saw his beloved's face. She was wearing her typical outfit, which included an orange top and matching shorts. The top was a little too small, clinging to her breasts and ending just beneath them, while the pants did the same thing, but only with her ass. Her red hair was grown down to her back. Her eyes were so green that they appeared to have been cut from perfect emeralds. She was doing the same to him as he was absorbing every glance she gave him. His eyes were the deepest shade of blue she had ever seen. It seemed as though the ocean lived there. He had blonde, spiky hair that reached his shoulders. He had had his Hokage robes made especially for him, and he was wearing them. In order to always have a piece of his wife with him, he had the bottom flames of his white robes changed from the customary red to orange. While most people didn't notice, she thought it was sweet. Minato finally spoke after what seemed like an eternity. In an attempt to lighten the situation, he said, "I will try, but no promises. You know how I can be. Go on. Go learn that jutsu that is going to save everyone, you big dope." Kushina laughed. Before leaping out of the window and racing to his office, he said, "Okay, I will. See you when I finish my love." He pulled out a very large blue scroll from its hidden compartment and opened it, saying, "Okay, one of the jutsus in this scroll has to work. With a whole month at his disposal, he should be able to find something to help him defeat the beast." Knowing that the jutsu he needed was probably in the forbidden category, he skipped right over the low-level jutsus. It was indeed possible to stop it with the first jutsu he saw, but it came at a very high cost. Reaper Death Seal, an S-class forbidden jutsu, calls forth the Shinigami himself to draw the soul into the caster's body unless the caster selects a different body. The Shinigami demands that the caster's soul be taken as payment for his power and for taking the target's soul. Minato read the scroll until he fell asleep, finding no other options yet, and he said, I will only use that if there is no other way. The price is too high if there is another way. After a month, Minato had not discovered any other jutsu strong enough to safely dispatch the nine-tailed fox, which was almost at the gates. Furthermore, things had gotten worse over time. His wife had begun to experience complications, and she had since passed away during childbirth. Her body gave out because the strain was too much for it to bear. However, there was some good news. The unborn child she was carrying had survived and was in perfect health. As he drew the seal for the fox's spirit to go on Naruto's belly, Minato remarked, "It looks like I have a volunteer for the jutsu. I'm sorry my son, but this has to be done." Naruto grinned up at his father as if he understood. Minato quickly left for the battlefield after picking up his son once the seal was finished. The battlefield, a random Chunin yelled, "Hold the demon back, we have to stall it till the fourth Hokage gets here." The field outside the Hidden Leaf Village was covered in bodies. The majority were merely red spots on the grass. They were fortunate. The beast's enormous claws sliced others in two. The unfortunate ones were the ones who had to go through that suffering because they were still alive but could not be saved. A huge toad with a sword on its side and a pipe protruding from its mouth smashed in front of the fox just when everything appeared to be lost. It was the fourth Hokage. The head of a toad as he searched through the seals for the jutsu that would permanently stop the fox. Minato said, "Gamabunta, thank you for everything you have done for me." Gamabunta, the giant toad, said, "Goodbye Minato, may you rest in peace." Minato yelled, "Forbidden Jutsu Reaper Death Seal." The fox lost the battle the moment he called out the jutsu. It was confined inside a newborn baby, and it could only look on in horror. Minato closed his eyes for the final time and said, "Goodbye my son, I hope the village sees you as a hero for this." The third Hokage arrived on the scene and picked up Naruto as soon as Minato died. As he carried the sleeping infant to the council chamber, the third said, "I hope your wish is granted Minato. I just know that this is going to give me a headache." Chamber of the council, the third Hokage said sadly, "As you all know by now, the fourth Hokage gave his life today to save us from the nine-tailed fox. He used the Reaper Seal Jutsu and sealed the demon inside the boy in my arms. In his lengthy life, that was among the worst choices he could have made." The response came so quickly that practically everyone in the room was demanding the child's blood. A woman with pink hair yelled, "We can't let that demon live Hokage. Sama, he must be killed while he is weak." According to another member of the civilian council, "I agree with Haruno. Sama, the demon must be slain." After placing the boy in his crib, the elderly Hokage screamed at the council, asking how they could all be so foolish. "You are all fucking blind. This is a child we are talking about here, not even a day old too. You want him killed because he holds the demon inside him. You are all the demons here," he yelled. He turned around and was astounded by what he saw. Standing over the crib, holding a kunai, was an elderly man with one arm and an eye patch. In a tone that betrayed his lack of feeling for the child, he said, "I'm sorry, but this has to be done Sarutobi. Sama." Sarutobi yelled, "Danzo no," as Danzo hit the boy with his kunai. On his seal, dead center. Danzo made a serious error when he said, "The deed is done." The entire group was blown to the ground by a tremendous chakra explosion. Naruto's tears were the next thing anyone noticed. Sarutobi was startled to see what had happened and hurried to the boy's side. Baby Naruto's eyes had changed to fox eyes, and he now had a tail and a pair of fox ears. Sarutobi said, "Danzo, what have you just done?" Danzo cried out, terrified of what his former adversary would do. I didn't mean for this to happen Hokage. Sama, honestly. Danzo, you have gone way too far this time. IHEARBY call for the execution of Danzo. All in favor raise your hands, Sarutobi yelled. Although the council's response to this was not entirely uniform, hands were gradually raised. Unfortunately, only the clan heads of the Inuzuka, Nara, Akamichi, Yamanaka, and Hyuga raised their hands. The head of the Uchiha clan and the 5 members of the civilian council held their hands down. This greatly disappointed Sarutobi. He was not going to be punished for his previous rival's attack on a member of Leaf Village, which was an attempt to kill the member. Knowing that he wouldn't die, Danzo calmed down. He was fortunate, and he was aware that he would not be attempting anything new anytime soon. "I owe Fugaku a favor for this. That was too close," Danzo reflected, nodding slightly to the Uchiha head. In a 6-5 vote, with the majority being against the issue, Danzo shall not be executed. Sarutobi saddened. "As for the child, I wish him to be placed in the orphanage until he is at least 8 years of age. I will deliver him to the orphanage at the end of this meeting and will check up on him every so often." No one spoke against his wishes. They were wise enough not to agitate the Hokage. As he turned to head to the orphanage, Sarutobi waved his hand and said, "If there is nothing else, then the meeting is dismissed." "I'm sorry, Naruto. If I could, I would adopt you, but the Hokage is too busy to adopt a child and provide the child with the care they require." When Sarutobi first arrived at the orphanage, he was thinking about how he could make Naruto's life easier. However, the main attendant interrupted him with a loud, "Demon. He is not a demon head attendant, and I expect this child to be very well taken care of during the minimum 8 years he is here unless he is adopted by that time." Sarutobi replied with authority. The least he could do was assist Naruto by attempting to dispel the rumors that he is a demon, if he was unable to adopt him. With a forced smile, the attendant carefully removed Naruto from the Hokage's embrace. Before taking him away, she remarked sourly, "Of course, Hokage. Sama, he will be in good hands." Sarutobi said to himself as he made his way back to his former office, "Goodbye, Naruto. I hope you grow up to be very strong." Naruto's first year a month ago, Naruto began to walk. It took him so long because he'd hardly ever left his room long enough to become accustomed to walking. The caretakers claimed that his room, an empty broom closet, was good enough for the likes of him. He had come to hate them in return, even though he didn't understand why they hated him so much. After all, it was only fair. Year 2 of Naruto. As he gave Naruto a piece of bread and some water, one of the caregivers angrily remarked, "Here is your food, brat." By then, Naruto had had enough. He said, "Me want more." The caregiver spat as he left, leaving Naruto to sit and eat his bread. "You don't get more than what is needed to survive, you demon." They would simply disregard his claims for necessities like more food because his life hadn't been the best thus far. They were indifferent. They didn't. Year 3 of Naruto. As Naruto grew older, the caregivers became worse. He was aware that it was because of his ears and tail. He was upset that he was treated less favorably than the other children, but he had no idea why he was different. He would walk around the orphanage every day only to be knocked down by an older child or a caregiver, and he would then be disciplined for obstructing them. He mostly stayed in his room and only came out of his closet when he was bored. He told no one, "I hate it here." Year 4 of Naruto. Naruto continued to ponder why he was the most despised of all the children. He stopped trying to be kind and helpful. Even when the Hokage paid him a visit, he remained solitary and simply glared at everyone. The Hokage questioned, "Naruto, why are you so angry?" As Naruto ate some food the Hokage had brought him, he remarked, "You don't care. Leave me alone." In an attempt to elicit a response from the young boy, the Hokage said, "Of course I care, Naruto. Please, you have been acting like this every time I come to visit you. What is wrong?" Naruto yelled, "Leave me alone," and hurried back to his closet. Year 5 of Naruto. Naruto's attitude toward the Hokage and the caretakers had not changed. It was just another visit from the Hokage. Sarutobi took out a key and said, "Naruto, I have something for you." Naruto spit out, "What do I need that for, old bastard?" He had no faith in any of the people in this entire village. Sarutobi put the key down and stood up from the table they were at, saying, "Naruto, I know how harsh the people are here to you, so take the key and follow me." Naruto took the key and followed the elderly man after deciding to make fun of him this time. They arrived at a tiny apartment after a few minutes of walking and the villagers' irate curses, to which Naruto scolded them. Just a kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, and living room, and nothing too large or elaborate. Naruto chuckled mockingly, "So what, old man, you decided to take me to a place that someone owns? Very funny, ha ha ha." Sarutobi grinned and remarked, "This place is owned by someone, Naruto, you. This will be your home from now on." Naruto questioned, "What about food?" When Sarutobi opened the cabinets, a lot of microwavable food was visible. In an attempt to gain the blonde's trust, Sarutobi said, "You just follow the directions and you have all the food you want. I will restock it monthly, and if you want I can also enroll you in the Ninja Academy for when you turn 8. As Naruto's teeth grew over time, he developed big fangs in place of typical incisors. Naruto said icily, "Enroll me, old man. It could be fun to beat everyone." With a sigh, Sarutobi left Naruto to rest. After concluding that he was quite exhausted, Naruto went to the bedroom and lay down on the bed, promptly dozing off. But Naruto would be altered by what happened that evening. But not in a positive way. Naruto was drawn into his mindscape as he dozed off. He surveyed his surroundings and looked around. He said, without addressing anyone specifically, "Well, isn't this place a piece of shit?" He didn't anticipate a reply. A booming, dark voice said, "At least you don't have to live here." Searching for the source of the voice, Naruto yelled, "Who's there? Too afraid to show yourself?" The voice repeated, Follow the light, child, and find out the truth of your torment. Naruto thought it might be interesting to find out why he was despised. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care about the villagers, so what could go wrong? Naruto pondered what the truth might be as he made his way down the corridor in the direction of the red light that was glowing. Soon his wondering would be over. Around a corner, Naruto noticed a huge cage with a piece of paper that read, "Seal," affixed to the door. Once more, the voice said, "Come closer." Naruto approached the door, but 3 enormous claws shot out of the bars as soon as he was a few feet away. But Naruto didn't even bat an eye. The claws stopped a few inches from his face after slamming into the cage bars. He asked angrily, "Was that supposed to scare me?" The voice said, "Very interesting. You are not like normal humans." "I am no human. No human has these ears, tail, eyes, and fangs that I do now. Quite wasting my time, and tell me who the fuck you are?" demanded Naruto. As it spoke, the voice laughed darkly. The fox declared, its red eyes glowing through the cage's darkness, "You are quite interesting, child. Very well, I will tell you who I am, and maybe after I do you will show me the respect I deserve. I am the great 9-tailed fox, the most powerful of all the 9 demons." Naruto merely sneered. "Like that is supposed to impress me. If you are so powerful, then how did you get sealed inside me, you stupid fox?" Naruto replied. The fox put his head against the bars and remarked, "Your 4th Hokage sealed me inside you in a last-ditch attempt to stop me from destroying your pathetic village." Naruto grinned and remarked, "It's a shame you didn't succeed." When Naruto responded, the fox grinned, "I like you, kid." Naruto fixed the fox with his gaze. "Hey, so I have the strongest demon of existence as a friend. Interesting," he replied. Gritting its teeth, the fox said, "Tell me something, child. Do you wish for those villagers to respect you?" "Why on earth would I want that? They treated me like I should have just dropped dead, so I will wish that fate on them." With a sickly smile, the fox said, "I can help with that." Naruto grinned back and said, "I'm listening. There will be a multitude of things I can do for you, kid. First off will be that I will train you in the 2 years you have before you enter that academy, so that you will be an ultra badass ninja before the others can even start. Second will be that I will lend you my chakra when you need or ask for it. Third, I will teach you enough jutsu so that you rival all 5 Kage put together." The fox stated as he listed things it would do to assist Naruto. "Why are you going through this much for me? What do you get out of it?" replied Naruto. "I survive, that's what I get. If you die, I die, so I'm doing this so that I won't die. After all, it would be really horrible if I died," the fox replied. Naruto agreed with a smile, saying that he had no right to complain if this was all the fox was doing. He would receive access to the fox's chakra, training of a tailed beast, and vast quantities of jutsu to use against his adversaries. Naruto remarked, "You got yourself a deal, fox." "Oh no, if you are going to accept this deal, then you are going to start calling me Kyuubi." "Sensei, you got that, kid?" replied the fox. Naruto smiled malevolently and said, "That's fine by me, Kyuubi." "Sensei, that's fine by me. When do we start?" "We will start tomorrow. You need your rest and I need to think up a training regimen for you, brat. Now get out of here and get some real sleep," the fox replied. Nodding, Naruto willed himself to leave the area and return to his room, where he would rest for a long time. But he heard people searching through his house when he awoke from his mental visit. With a sick smile on his face, Naruto thought, "Ah, my first victims." Through their mental connection, the fox said, "Great, show me what you can do, child." "Are there any restrictions?" was the only thing Naruto asked. "Just beat the shit out of them all instead of killing them," the fox advised. As he stalked his new home in silence for his prey, Naruto remarked, "Oh fine, I will try and enjoy it." They had just opened his door when he saw them. They had a cheap alcohol odor, and it was obvious they had been drinking from the way they spoke. A man slurred, "Where ish that demon? He had red hair and emerald green eyes." The second one slurred even worse than the first, "He ish pw robablesly in dat's bedroom." Naruto thought to himself, "Only 2, this isn't going to be as much fun as I thought it would be." Before emerging from the shadows, he waited for the 2 inebriated men to enter his room. Naruto startled the 2 inebriated men by asking, "You 2 wouldn't happen to be looking for me now, would you?" Without waiting for them to respond, he charged forward, slammed his fist into the first man's face, breaking his nose, knocking him out, and then turned to face the other man. Even though this one was larger than the first, Naruto wasn't intoxicated and he was. The man fell to the ground, writhing in agony, as Naruto charged at him and slammed his fist into his stomach. Before knocking the other man unconscious and dragging them to the hospital, Naruto gave him a look and said, "Pathetic." Before leaving, he left a note on the bodies. Those who mess with Naruto the demon end up like this. This is the only caution you have. Child, that was really fascinating, the fox remarked. How so? Naruto inquired. You struck without hesitation or pity, and you even showed them kindness by taking them to the hospital. The fox sarcastically retorted, how sweet. Naruto answered, that way the other villagers will know not to bother me. The fox remarked, I'm not so sure about that one. What do you mean? Bewildered, Naruto inquired. The fox retorted, I mean that they will probably act against you once they see what you did. So what? In addition to having you support me in the training you promised to provide, I can manage it. Remember that until I finish your training, there is someone who is better than you, so don't assume that just because I can help, you will always win. I'm sorry, Sensei, I wasn't paying attention. You're 6 years old, and I didn't think you would think that yet. In any case, let's begin your training and head into the woods. Despite his slight fatigue, Naruto obeyed his sensei's commands. Since it was almost 7 in the morning, it would be wise to go into the forest for the time being since someone would probably discover those two fools soon. He went to investigate after hearing something that briefly made his heart race with sympathy as he was running through the forest. The fox yelled angrily, Where are you going, child? This isn't the way I told you to go. I promise, I'm just checking on something, Naruto answered. But neither of them anticipated seeing a young child the age of Naruto sobbing while leaning her back against a tree. Naruto could only make out the little girl's purple hair because her hands were covering the rest of her face. Naruto was powerless to stop himself. Why are you crying? The abrupt voice made the girl jump, and Naruto thought she was going to attack, so he leapt away before she could get a clear view of him. Child, you should have just followed the path. Kyuubi sneered. Naruto remarked, I don't know what came over me, Sensei, but it won't happen again. The girl he startled, though, had another question. Who was that? Did they actually give a damn? He was beginning to second guess his decision to accept the fox's training schedule after returning to Naruto. As Naruto hit the ground, the fox uttered the words, again, child. Naruto complained, but Sensei, this is too difficult. I doubt anyone can perform this many push-ups. Stop complaining, your later, improved training is far superior to 500 push-ups. Naruto felt ill all of a sudden. The fox grinned in his cage and thought, I love torturing people, but he was unprepared for Naruto's response. Alright, I'll keep trying if it only gets harder from here. As he placed his hands and toes on the ground once more and began the exercise as he had previously, Naruto yelled in his mind, and he showed no signs of stopping until he completed it. Kyuubi was impressed. He had never witnessed a child act in this way just because he knew that things would become more difficult. And there's more. Even though this child was only 6 years old, he already exceeded the fox's expectations. This kid is incredible. Perhaps I have underestimated him, he reflected. 200, 201, 202, Naruto said. Wow, the fox thought. Counting the other push-ups he's done over 1,000 just today. An additional hour passed before Naruto was able to finish the exercise. As he panted from exhaustion and felt the perspiration trickle down his face like rain, Naruto thought, finally done. The fox ordered, give me 250 sit-ups now that that's done. Oh come on, yelled Naruto. We had a long day ahead of us. 2 years have passed since Naruto's first day of forest training. Even by the fox's standards, his progress was astounding. He could barely complete 250 sit-ups, 500 push-ups, and 25-pound weightlifting before he started. But because of the fox, he was now able to lift more than 200 pounds of weights, was working on his speed with weights, and was getting close to 2,000 push-ups and 1,000 sit-ups. The only advanced ninjutsu he knew was the shadow clone jutsu, which he used in place of his clone jutsu. His chakra control, which Kyuubi had taught him, was about mid-Chunin level, and he could execute a number of different ninjutsu, though they were all rather simple. Naruto's academy begins in a week, and the fox gave him a straightforward assignment. Get him some new clothes that don't make him stand out too much. To purchase the items he had considered, he had to enter the village's sole ninja clothing store. The only issue was that everyone was aware of his identity, detested him, and refused to serve him. There was an easy way around this, or at least easy for Naruto. He used some of the fox's chakra and visualized the shape of a middle-aged man with black hair and a goatee. Once he had all the details in his mind, he concentrated more and, with a puff of smoke, the middle-aged man appeared where Naruto had been. He walked out of his apartment with his wallet securely in his pocket, full of Hokage money to purchase supplies and tools from the shops. He gave him far more than Naruto required, but this was probably because the elderly Hokage was worried about the stores overcharging him for necessities. The salesperson approached Naruto as he opened the door and inquired if he needed assistance finding anything. He just made up the story that he needed to buy his son new clothes because his son was going to the academy in a week. The salesperson wished him luck in finding what he was looking for and directed him to the children's clothing section. In search of the items he wanted, Naruto moved up and down the clothing rack. A short black hooded cape, a mask with a slit cut out for the eyes and nose bridge to show, a black long sleeve shirt with a red X across the chest, arm braces with concealed pockets for weights or senbon needles, a child's chainmail suit for parents who want to give their kids a better chance of surviving, and black ninja pants with several pockets for scrolls or weapons like shuriken and kunai were among those items. In addition to purchasing a pair of chakra, conducting katana and some bandage wrappings and ninja sandals, he also purchased kunai and shuriken. Without any problems, he carried his things up to the counter and made his payment. He dropped the illusion and changed back to his original form as soon as he was finished and out of sight. He still had training to complete the following day, and the academy was only a week away. On his way home, he came across a little stand that had never been there before. It read, Ichiraku Ramen Grand Opening. He still had money to spare, so he decided to give it a try. After all, it couldn't be worse than the snake meat the fox had forced him to eat during a survival training session. First bowl is on the house. He finally managed to get the taste out of his mouth after a week. 3 people were already eating when he approached the stand, so he wasn't surprised when he was yelled at as soon as he took a seat. Get out of here, demon. Gross, I don't want your hair in my ramen. Why don't you just die already? The proprietor and his daughter looked at what made the 3 customers start yelling after they had caused a disturbance. The owner yelled, hold it, and the 3 men looked at him in disbelief. One of the men exclaimed, don't tell me you would support this abomination. A customer is a customer. If you have a problem with how I do my business, then I suggest you leave, he replied. Infuriated, one of the men yelled, if you serve this demon, then we will make sure no one else will come here, while his face flushed. Then leave, I don't want to serve people like you anyway. Leaving just because someone you don't like has arrived, you make me sick, the proprietor responded. Not that he had an option. Naruto had already taken a seat and was listening to the entire discussion. It's likely that Hiyashi Hyuga heard these idiots because they were so noisy. I apologize for that. Name's Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki. Well then, Naruto, what can I get for you today? Naruto remarked, I'll take whatever you recommend. The proprietor said, 1 miso pork ramen coming up. When his food finally arrived, Naruto eagerly awaited it and was delighted by its flavor. With his mouth full of noodles, Naruto uttered, fish-ish are really goods, old man. The old man said, well, I'm glad you like it, Naruto. Grinning, Naruto slurped up the remaining noodles and broth. Get me another one, old man. The proprietor and his daughter exchanged glances. You do know that only the first bowl is free, right? He inquired. Just now, Naruto took out some cash and placed it on the counter. Yay, but I don't care, it's good food and you are the only store I don't have to hide my form in order to get service. With a smile, the proprietor began preparing another bowl, which Naruto promptly devoured. He returned home after paying his respects to the 2 owners of the ramen stands. After opening the door and placing everything on his couch, Naruto shut and secured it. He had one final thought before falling asleep as he lay on his bed and slowly closed his eyes. It was today, the Ninja Academy's founding. To ensure he wouldn't be late for his first day, Naruto rose earlier than normal. When he arrived home the other evening, he had made some adjustments to his attire. Now, his mask was partially sewn inside his new hooded cape, allowing him to take off the hood and mask while still wearing the cape if he so desired. Additionally, he kept his kunai in the pockets of his pants and inserted weights into the concealed spaces in his arm braces. He forgot about one thing as he put on the mask and hood and glanced in the mirror. His tail protruded from his trousers. It was just annoying and uncomfortable, not painful. Since his clothes would probably be destroyed on his first risky mission, he concluded that his comfort level was more significant than whether they were still intact. Then, after a brief pause, he tucked his tail around his waist. It said, looking good, child. You look like a real ninja now. Naruto answered, thank you, Kyubi. Sensei. Naruto departed early from home and made his way to the academy. He received the typical taunts on the way there. He didn't care, they would pay in due time. Leaning against the side of the door, Naruto saw the students arrive one by one, having arrived at the academy before anyone else. A boy with strangely shaped black hair, black eyes, and a "go fuck yourself" expression was the first person there besides Naruto. Before the other boy could speak, He and Naruto locked eyes and stared at each other, evaluating each other. He questioned angrily, "You got a problem?" Naruto spit back, "Yeah, he's my height and pissing me off." He yelled, "You dare talk to an Uchiha like that?" The Uchiha boy screamed and shouted, but Naruto calmly said, "I don't care who you are, but a name doesn't make you immune to scolding and making mistakes. Hide behind your name all you want, but it will only make you a bigger target." A young girl dressed in ninja pants and a bulky jacket was the next child to arrive. She was obviously a Hyuga based on her eyes. Naruto was certain that he had seen her previously, but he was unable to recall where he had seen her. Something inside of him told him not to, but he decided it was unimportant and ignored it. Naruto heard two girls yelling, seemingly at one another, but he felt a sudden tug on his tail before they arrived. Before slapping his hand away from the Uchiha, he turned around and gave him a dagger-like glare. As Naruto stepped back from the Uchiha and saw the two girls he heard yelling dash into the courtyard and ran toward the Uchiha boy, he said, "Look, I don't know what your problem is, but touch me again and it will be the last thing you do." One of them was only covering her modest areas with purple clothing that was a bit too short for her age. She wore her long blonde hair in a ponytail, with a lock of hair falling down by one eye, and her eyes were light blue. The other wore a light pink dress with a circle at the back and had long pink hair. But Naruto saw that her forehead was enormous. He was staring at it, but he was unaware of it. "You got a problem, freak?" shouted the girl with the pink hair. Before he leaned against a tree and ignored her cries and baseless threats, he stated bluntly, "Your heads are so big that I'm willing to bet that on your first real mission it gets struck with a kunai." He watched the gates as the other children entered. A boy with a weight issue who seemed unconcerned about it as he ate his bag of chips. Another boy wearing a white puppy in his sweatshirt. A boy wearing a trench coat and black sunglasses, and, finally, a boy who was plain looking but could be identified by his peculiarly pineapple-shaped hair just before the doors opened. Other kids showed up, but none of them were particularly noteworthy. A man with a smile on his face and a scar across his nose greeted the children as the doors opened and escorted them into their classroom. "Hello students, my name is Iruka Amino, and this is my assistant Mizuki. We will be your instructors for the next 4 years. So it would help if we all had introductions instead of roll call to help get an idea of how you look and act for future reference. Who would like to go first?" Iruka responded. First to get to his feet, smiling, was the boy with the white dog. "This is Akamaru," he said, holding up his dog while receiving a WWS from the majority of the girls present. "I am Kiba Inuzuka, the future head of the Inuzuka clan." The plain boy yawned and went to sleep, saying, "This is troublesome, but I am Shikamaru Nara, next leader of the Nara clan." "I am Sasuke Uchiha, next head of the great and powerful Uchiha clan. You are lucky to be in my presence." The Uchiha gushed. "I'm sorry for your loss, Sasuke. I knew there was a survivor from the massacre. Who will come next?" Iruka inquired. The blonde girl almost screamed as she sat down again beside the boy, saying, "I am Ino Yamanaka and I am Sasuke's future wife. My name is Sakura Haruno, and I am not Ino. Piga, I am Sake's future wife," the girl with the pink hair yelled. "Now simple down," Iruka shouted before taking several deep breaths to calm himself down. "Who's next?" As the boy in the trench coat explained, "My name is Shino Aburame, next in line for the Aburame clan." The fat boy swallowed the remaining potato chips and said, "My name is Ishichoji Akamichi, next in line of the Akamichi clan." The girl in the heavy jacket said shyly, "My name is H. Hinata Hyuga A. And I am the H. heiress of the Hyuga Circa clan." Although Iruka didn't enjoy it, it was policy that no hoods or hats were permitted in the classroom. "Looks like it's just you left, son. Tell us your name and please remove your hood. It's a distraction to the class and you could be hiding something against the rules in there." As he slowly raised his hood, Naruto said, "My name is one you should all learn very quickly. I am Naruto Uzumaki, container of the nine-tailed fox," he said, getting to his feet and letting his tail drop free, removing his hood entirely to reveal his ears and fangs. One person was silent in tongue but not in mind amidst the various screams and demon cries. "Naruto Uzumaki? He looks like the boy that was concerned for me, could it be?" Hinata let her thoughts wander while Iruka attempted to bring the class under control without assistance from Mizuki, who was grinning slightly but nobody noticed because everyone was too preoccupied with the chaos. As he slowly raised his hood, Naruto said, "My name is one you should all learn very quickly. I am Naruto Uzumaki, container of the nine-tailed fox," he said, standing up and letting his tail fall free, removing his hood completely, exposing his ears and fangs. "I am the embodiment of your nightmares." The class erupted in demon and other insults, which only made Iruka more and more irate until he could take it no more. Now is the time to set down, Iruka yelled, his head appearing to grow to unreal proportions to make his point. Surely, Naruto's imagination overcame him. As the class settled down, either from boredom or fear of Iruka's yells, Iruka decided to outline the curriculum for the next 4 years of instruction. The first year would cover basic subjects like math and the history of the Hidden Leaf Village. The second year would cover the clans of the village and other villages. The third year would begin with taijutsu and light spars. The fourth year would be basic ninjutsu instruction and the final exam, where they would be divided into their teams upon graduation. Since the students would need to rest for the following day, Iruka decided to let them go home early because there wouldn't be much else to do that day. After returning home, Naruto lay on his bed for a minute to unwind before beginning his Kyuubi workout. He burned through the remainder of the day as if it were nothing, and he quickly went to bed. First year. They learned about the Hokages and other cages of the other hidden villages, and he taught them basic math skills that he would use later in the second year. The first year went as Iruka had described. They took a number of tests, but Naruto's was different. They were much harder than they should have been, and they were trying to cheat him out of school, which was just another reason that they all had to pay, and not even the teachers cared about him. Sasuke Uchiha missed most of that year, but he never disclosed the reason. The second year, a first-year student actually advanced to the second-year class during year 2, which was a very strange development, but the child's math and history skills were comparable to those of the second-year class, and he had some basic ninjutsu, which was impressive for an 8-year-old. Naruto learned about the Leaf's clans, but what really caught his attention was one of the clans from an old village that had been destroyed long ago. The clan was said to be extinct, but with the power that Iruka was claiming to possess, there was no way that they could have gone extinct. I will have to remember that clan's name, he thought. When they mentioned that clan, nobody saw the new kid wince. Third year. It was Naruto's favorite year, or at least his second favorite, for taijutsu training. He already knew a very secret form that he was saving for a rainy day, but he also knew a couple others that were not well known, but even a low Chunin would recognize the forms he was going to use frequently. He quickly became the class's top student in terms of taijutsu, and Sasuke was second, which really irritated him that Naruto was superior. The other students in the class were fairly close to each other, but Hinata Hyuga's friendly demeanor caused her ratings to drop until she was rated last. Naruto wondered why she held back, because she had the potential to be second in the class, but she always held back. Fourth year. This year, Naruto was thrilled because, in addition to training constantly with the Fox's never-ending hell training, the Fox had told him something fascinating that morning. Backward. He didn't question it, just walked up to the Kyuubi's cage and waited for the Fox to acknowledge him. Naruto woke up in his mindscape, somewhere he hadn't been in a long time, and those cracked walls had been restored, taking on a slightly red color with wall-mounted candles burning slightly. Naruto, I have to tell you something important. Sensei, what is it? Naruto inquired. Your bloodstream contains a mutation. I haven't been able to identify it yet, but don't worry, it won't kill you. I can tell that much, the Fox remarked. Naruto bowed and went back to the real world, saying, that's good to know, thank you Sensei. Flashback termination. Sasuke was becoming worse and worse. He didn't care about anything but power and retribution. Everyone knew about the massacre by this point, and his fan club tried to get closer to him by offering him a home and other things. Naruto took advantage of this and insulted him about it more and more during their spars, making him angrier and angrier until he became sloppy. The year proceeded similarly to the previous year, with the standings remaining the same until the last day of classes. Even though they had play fights, Naruto didn't care about them because he always held back. Today, however, was the day he cared about at the graduation exam, and he was prepared for anything. When the names were finally called, it was his turn. He entered the examination room and made Iruka and Mizuki uncomfortable by staring them down. Okay Naruto, the exam is simple this year, just make. Mizuki interrupted, grinning at his scheme to trick the demon and force him to complete his task for him, 300 clones. With a sigh, Naruto realized that someone was always trying to hold him down. Fortunately, he had the Fox's assistance. The Fox knew practically every jutsu in the world, but he only taught Naruto the Shadow Clone Jutsu, which he taught him in the hopes that it would help him get free someday. So far, it hasn't worked, but it was ideal in this particular situation. Since being a ninja meant being cunning and stealthy, he performed the hand signs for the jutsu. Naruto combined the hand signs to give the impression that he was only performing them for the clone jutsu. Jutsu clone. Naruto walked up to the table with the headbands and took the last one, tucking it away in his pocket before leaving the room silently and grinning. He shouted as 300 clones filled the room, all smirking at Mizuki, who had his jaw hanging in surprise. Very nice display back there, child. You didn't even use my chakra, the fox replied. As he headed home, Naruto remarked, I aim to please Sensei, I aim to please. He was unsure of his team's composition. Satisfied with his triumph over Mizuki, Naruto strode back into the classroom. He reasoned, that will teach him to try to cheat me out of something I want. Iruka returned to the room, still flushed from berating Mizuki for the way he treated Naruto. Rewind. You should make the exam a little harder next year, Mizuki. This was too easy, Naruto said, turning to face Mizuki as he smirked while wearing his new headband. Iruka turned to Mizuki and began yelling as Naruto left the room. How crazy was that, Mizuki? I was not about to let the demon become a ninja. He must have cheated somehow. There is no way he could have done that many without cheating. Mizuki responded. What the devil did you try to do to a child simply because of the burden he has to bear? Mizuki is low, even for you. As he left the room, Iruka yelled. Flashback. End. After calming himself with a few deep breaths, Iruka turned to the class and grinned, saying, Congratulations to all those who passed the exam, and to those that didn't, do not worry, there is always next year. Even though he passed, Shino Aburame made the decision to stay another year to better assist his family with clan matters, despite the fact that some members of the class hung their heads in shame. It has been an honor and a privilege to teach you all, and I wish you nothing but the best luck in your careers as ninjas, Iruka said, grinning at everyone before continuing. You've all performed incredibly well. Even though you weren't the best fighter I've ever met, Hinata, you are by far one of the best people. I regret that the council chose to emphasize the Genin's fighting prowess rather than their intelligence. You would have undoubtedly been at least in the middle of the ranks. You and Akamaru already work as a fantastic team, Kiba. If you keep up the good work, I'm sure you could even outperform your mother and her partner. With assistance and the right training, Sakura, you have the potential to become the next Tsunade. All you need to do is practice focusing on yourself rather than Sasuke. You were exactly like your father, Shikamaru. Actually, it's kind of funny, but I have faith that you will eventually surpass him in skill. Like Sakura, you are an incredible kunoichi, and I have a hunch your father will be pleased with your development. I see nothing but your father's approval of your development, Shoji. You're his son, okay? How can I forget you, Akio Kiyoshi? You are the first person in academy history to skip a grade, and practically everyone in the village doesn't know anything about your family. You are also a year younger than the others, but you are just as strong as the others. The only Uchiha who remains devoted to the hidden leaf is you, Sasuke. I'm honored to have taught you, and I hope you succeed in the future and bring your clan back to its former glory. You are by far the most unusual member of the class, Naruto. You carry a burden that no one so young should have to bear, yet you manage to overcome every challenge that comes your way. As the students filed out of the classroom slowly, Iruka grinned at each one of them. You are all dismissed. Come back tomorrow and you will have your team assignments and Jonin leader. After deciding that the door was not the best way to leave, Naruto opened a window, leapt to a nearby branch, and then walked home. Feeling a little peckish, he stopped by Ichiraku's for a bite to eat, ordered the usual, chatted with the owner and his daughter, paid, and then returned home. He trained with the fox as usual, but this time the fox required something, so Naruto closed his eyes and opened them to peer in front of the fox's cage. What do you want, Sensei? Did Naruto ask? Kid, I have some interesting news. It appears that due to our fusion, your elemental affinity and mine are combining into what I don't know yet, but I will let you know when it reveals itself more, the fox replied. Naruto bowed to the fox and said, Thank you for the knowledge, Sensei. I'm sure it will be useful in the future. The fox flashed its teeth in what it thought was a smile and said, No problem, child, and I agree with you completely. I'm sure it will come in handy. After deciding there was nothing more to do for the day, Naruto crawled into his bed and fell asleep after closing and opening his eyes to discover he was back at home. Naruto's dream there were explosions everywhere, probably from exploding tags. The battleground was a village. The area was covered in a red shadow that resembled blood. Ninja bodies were scattered all over, some pinned to walls with kunais protruding from them. The village's signs had been reduced to nothing. Most of the buildings had been destroyed. Two ninjas were fighting with everything they had. One was wearing all black, his face obscured by his sweat, soaked hair, and he was panting heavily. The other ninja, the first one's opponent, was dressed in all white, his face obscured from view and also had severe wounds. Why did you harm us in this way? What have we done to you? The white-clad man yelled. You are aware of your actions toward me. As the scene began to fade, the man in black ran through a series of hand signs, building up a huge amount of chakra. Forbidden jutsu. you try and act like what you did was something that should be congratulated or something, but just remember that you brought this on yourself. The end of Naruto's dream. Confused by the dream, Naruto chose not to think about it and instead focused on the day that lay ahead of him. He got up, showered, dressed, ate, and completed all of his morning chores, including a quick warm up of 2,500 push-ups and sit-ups, as instructed by the fox. Following his workout, he left for the academy and his future as a ninja. Jumping from roof to roof, he made good time until he reached the academy's courtyard. The doors were open, so he entered or would have if someone hadn't grabbed his shoulder. "Whoever is touching me better let go if they ever want to use that hand again," warned Naruto. The person said, "Fight me, you loser." "Sasuke." Naruto let out a sigh. "Fight me," I said. "Now," said Sasuke. Sasuke was knocked out cold when Naruto spun around and slammed a fist into his stomach. "There's your fight. Return when you're able to fight." Naruto's name was written on a sheet of paper that was hanging on the chalkboard when he entered the classroom. He quickly located it and read it out loud to himself. Team 6. Naruto Uzumaki, Hinata Hyuga, Akio Kiyoshi Jonin Sensei. Kurenai Yuhi. With his feet up on the table and seated in a chair, Naruto remarked, "Well, this will be interesting, that's for sure." As usual, Naruto sat in the back of the class when Akio entered and helped a limping Sasuke to the board before Sasuke shrugged him away. Although he hadn't given Akio much attention during the academy years, he took the opportunity to get a good look at him now that they would be on the same team. Akio, who was about 2 inches shorter than Naruto, had a smile that was practically plastered on his face as he extended his hand to Naruto. He was wearing what appeared to be some old robes, most likely from his family, and his eyes were a dark green color. The robes were a pure white with brown lines that formed seemingly random patterns. "Hello Naruto, seeing as we are team mates now, I figured why not get a head start on making friends with my team, and since Hinata isn't here yet I decided to start with you," he replied. He shook his hand with a look of hatred for the village that never left his face as Naruto examined him in an attempt to assess Akio's skill. "I will look forward to our success as a team, Akio," was all he said. The other newly crowned genin entered the room slowly, waiting for their Jonin sensei to take them away and begin their new ninja lives. Sakura and Ino ran into the room, getting stuck in the doorway as usual, fighting over who would sit next to Sasuke. As they pushed past Sakura, who was nervous about being near Naruto for 2 reasons, the first being that she had just begun to feel something for him, remembering him from that day in the forest, and the second being that she wouldn't even tell Naruto herself that he would simply get rid of her, either by leaving or in a much bloody manner. However, it appeared that fate wasn't on her side, as Akio practically jumped over Naruto and bowed in front of her. "Hello Hinata, please come sit with your team, we can get to know each other before Kurenai Sensei gets here," he smiled. With nerves and fear taking hold of her, Hinata stammered, oh, I don't care, no." He returned to his seat on the opposite side of Naruto and gently dragged Hinata to a seat by him, saying, "Oh, don't be ridiculous, we won't mind." Hinata's heart was pounding because she was so close to Naruto without fainting, but her fear was telling her to keep her distance. She was startled out of her near drowning when a hand was placed in front of her. Looking at her, Naruto said, "Hello Hinata, I look forward to our success as a team." Hinata was overjoyed to see Naruto, the demon of the Hidden Leaf Village, holding out his hand to Hera, something she only thought would happen if they were fighting or she was in danger of falling off a cliff. She shook her head and gave him a shaky handshake, saying as calmly as she could, "As do I, and Naruto." The door to the classroom was thrown open as Kakashi was flung into the room and slammed against the wall. "Kakashi, if I see you read that book again I'm going to burn it," a female voice shouted as the owner said as she walked in the room. She was wearing a one-sleeved red shirt with a versus neck showing some fishnet underneath it. There were bindings down to mid-thigh, anything else on her body was covered by the thin fabric strips with a black stripe down the length with a black triangle coming from the stripe at certain points. Her black hair fell to about shoulder length while her eyes were a red that Naruto had noticed right away. She had placed her headband in the typical spot around her forehead. Kakashi, who was on the floor chuckling, slowly got back up and brushed the dust and dirt off of his outfit. Standing up, he was just a little taller than Kurenai. His Jonin vest on his chest covering the long sleeved blue shirt that had a neck going up to connect to a mask hiding 90% of his face. His one visible eye was black with no pupil that Naruto could see. His left eye was covered by his headband and his gray hair seemingly defied gravity. Now Kurenai," Kakashi responded. "It was just getting to the good part. I was planning on getting to my students as soon as I finished it." "You mean that you were getting to the perverted part and you wanted to read it before getting to the more important matter of picking up your students?" she responded. Kakashi happily closed his eye and said, "That's right. A pervert." Kurenai turned to face the class and then called for her team, shouting as she slapped him across the face. Kurenai glanced at Naruto, Akio, and Hinata as they got up and walked down to their sensei, grinning and saying, "Follow me, children, we have much to talk about." The villagers looked at Naruto as the three genin followed their jonin sensei, and he didn't mind that they weren't his concern, even though they were insulting him. Kurenai was gradually losing her temper, but neither he nor the others were harmed by the taunts, which the villagers uttered so softly that only she and Naruto could hear them. Two of the villagers were whispering to each other. "I can't believe they let that thing graduate the academy," someone said. "Why did the Hokage allow that creature to survive at all, much less become a member of the academy? What was he contemplating?" said the other. "Listen here, listen well, you two morons," Kurenai said, turning around and hurling two kunai dangerously close to the two women. Allowing any of these students to enroll and finish the academy was a wise decision on the part of the Hokage. And you are the true demons here if you would allow a baby to die. I expect to never hear of any insults you give to me or my students, but if I do, I will use the most terrible general jutsu you have ever heard of, and I will make one especially for you too. Take action. I create myself. Clearly? She was furious. As the general jutsu mistress of the Leaf Village threatened them, the two women could only nod and gaze at her. They knew it wasn't just a series of meaningless words. "All right, that's what I enjoy hearing." "Well, you see what I mean," she said, correcting the children before returning to her students. "I apologize, but I do not permit anyone to disparage my students," she smiled, adding, "If you three would just continue to follow me." "With whom were they disparaging, Sensei?" Akio inquired. "Why would you be interested in knowing that?" she answered. "I was the one, wasn't I?" Naruto inquired. Kurenai glanced at the floor, avoiding the dejected expression she knew would be on his face. "It's considered rude to not look someone in the eyes when they talk to you, Yuhi-sama," Naruto replied. Her eyes began to well up with tears as she slowly raised her head and said, "Yes, they were Naruto, I'm sorry." "Why? What they have to say doesn't matter to me. Their opinion of me is completely worthless," he said, grinning. Hinata said, "Why do T? They say T. Things about why. Why.you? Because I have the nine-tailed fox in me and don't even act surprised. I know for a fact that both of you knew already," he replied. "How does it feel?" Akio inquired. "What are you saying?" Naruto answered. "How does it feel to have the strongest demon lodged inside of you? He can be a bit annoying at times, but so far no complaints." Kyuubi remarked, "I heard that." Naruto joked with him, "It's a joke, Sensei, relax." As they entered the village's training ground area, Kurenai said, "Come on you three, we have been putting off this for too long." Several trees had been toppled or smashed into the nearby trees before they reached Training Ground 68. Kurenai explained, Training Ground 68 was once a great garden for the first Hokage's wife, but because of a civil war back then, the garden was completely destroyed, and she didn't feel it was worth it to restore it here. These trees are actually imported from the now gone land of Whirlpool, and they require a lot of care to keep alive here, but it's worth it. According to the legend, one of the real descendants of Whirlpool could rival all of the Hokages combined if they were able to harness the power of these trees, but no one is sure how. The entire training ground was once the most renowned garden in the Hidden Leaf Village, and Naruto could sense the energy from the ninja who fought their final battle here. Akio was astounded by the training ground's history as the site of a civil war battle and probably hidden prizes as well. "From now on, when we are not on missions, this is where we will meet and train," said Kurenai. "What have we done, then?" Naruto inquired. Before saying, Kurenai chuckled a little and said, "No Naruto, we aren't done just yet." "So what are we meant to do?" Akio inquired. "You believed that being a ninja was simple. You did graduate from the academy, but that's only rudimentary knowledge. You need to pass one more test," she said. Kurenai. "Sensei, what test would that be?" On the inside, Akio was freaking out because he had barely passed the academy's test, but he asked calmly. She grinned broadly and declared, "The test is mine." She grinned broadly and declared, "The test is mine." "So, Sensei, what is this test?" Hinata asked, attempting to control her stutter. "Yes, let us know what needs to be done. I will never again return to that academy," Akio declared. "Remain calm, kids. Everything will be explained." As she pulled out two silver bells on red strings and fastened them to her waist, Kurenai explained, "This test is similar to Kakashi's bell test." She smiled slightly at the child's excitement, but she couldn't help but wonder why Naruto hadn't spoken yet. Those who get a bell will pass, but if you don't, then you will fail and will have to repeat the academy all over again. Kurenai's expression made it clear that she wasn't joking. Hinata remarked, But Sensei, there are only T.2 bells. That's correct, so regardless of the consequences, one of you will return to the academy. Since you won't pass if you don't approach me with the intention of killing, that should inspire you to do so, Kurenai said, glaring at each of them. Too easy. Naruto held the bells in front of Kurenai before throwing them to Hinata and Akio, saying, I had the bells and now my team. Mates have them. It may be a little loose as to the rules, but that's how ninjas are. Before any of them could react, the Naruto in front of Kurenai burst into smoke as another Naruto ran out of the bushes and grabbed the bells off of Kurenai's waist. With a smile, Kurenai said, You are right, Naruto, you all would pass, if I was that careless. She must have recognized his talent. Naruto became irritated. If the bells were now in his teammates' hands, it was obvious that she had been that irresponsible, but Kurenai quickly clarified. With a sickly smile that was unworthy of her beauty, she said, I am not called the genjutsu mistress for no reason, Naruto. Naruto was wondering what she meant when Hinata gasped, and when he turned around, he saw that the bell in her hand was gradually fading away. He turned to Akio and saw the same thing happening to the bell in his hand. Naruto turned to face Kurenai, who grinned as her feet gradually disappeared. Illusion clone, my very own technique, so far no one has been able to duplicate it, Kurenai said. It won't be as simple as Kakashi's test, though, as I previously stated. I'm hidden somewhere in the training ground, and your job is to find me and get the bells from me. If you can, I'm giving you 3 till 2 o'clock, or 2 hours, to do so, she said, as her waist disappeared and her stomach began to grow. Remember to come at me with the intent to kill, otherwise, you will fail, she uttered as her neck began to ache. I refuse to return to the academy. Akio spoke firmly. More than anything else, the idea of returning frightened him. Hinata said, We won't fail. She didn't want to let Akio or Naruto down. Naruto simply gazed at Kurenai's fading face. She said, Good luck, you 3 will need it. Her face vanished, leaving no trace that a 4th person had ever been in the area. With no chance of failing this test, Naruto turned to his team and said, Okay, look, none of us 3 can defeat her by ourselves. Since you are a member of the Hyuga clan, Hinata, you should be able to see through the majority of her genjutsu with your eyes. She will undoubtedly only use weak genjutsu, which will prevent her from injuring or traumatizing the 3 children. Although he was fairly familiar with the Hyuga, he knew very little about the younger boy on his squad. Akio, I need to know your skills so that I can come up with a plan to beat her, he said. Well, I love getting close and personal in a fight, and earth-type jutsu is my specialty. Although I'm not that skilled yet, the men in my family are generally very adaptable because of the way we fight and are generally resistant to genjutsu, Akio remarked. As he began formulating a strategy, Naruto remarked, Okay, good to know. Hinata couldn't help but stare at Naruto as he thought, her feelings of admiration growing as she watched, his ears twitching subliminally as he did. Even though the test was about teamwork, Kurenai didn't want to know their plan before they came at her, so she smiled, disguised herself as a tree, and sent out an illusion clone as a distraction. Okay, I got it, he said, not knowing the identity of the figure that moved away. Kurenai smiled, thinking, this should be fun. She didn't have time to think further, though. Earth style. Jutsu pillar missile. As the ground surrounding the illusion clone split into extremely thin, short pillars and began to shoot at it innocuously, Akio yelled. Naruto yelled, Hinata, to indicate the next phase of their strategy. As she triggered her bloodline, Hinata uttered the words, Byakugan. In this world your enemy will do anything to guarantee their own safety or success. Kurenai reacted quickly, dropping her illusion and grabbing Hinata with a kunai at her throat. Naruto grinned as Hinata burst into smoke, revealing another Naruto who swiftly spun around in Kurenai's arms, escaping her grasp and aiming a punch at her face. Kurenai began to make signs for a simple genjutsu, but it was too late, and she unleashed the genjutsu covering the area of her, Naruto, and Akio. The genjutsu she used was a low-level distraction technique designed for escapes, and she wasn't going to let that chance slip by. As she turned to find a new hiding spot, she had to dodge a gentle fist strike aimed at one of her key chakra points, and she flipped back, landing in between Naruto and Akio, putting kunais to both of their necks. Come any closer and they will die, Hinata. Could you really live with yourself with the blood of your team on your hands? She threatened. G. Go ahead, K. Kill them if you see. Can live W. With children's B. Blood on your H. Hands. Hinata stopped, a terrified expression on her face saying, G. Go ahead, K. Kill them if you see. Can live W. W. With children's B. Blood on your H. Hands. The thought suddenly came to her, and she activated her bloodline. Kurenai was, to put it mildly, shocked. She hadn't anticipated the young Hyuga calling her bluff. Since she couldn't use genjutsu to deceive her while her bloodline was active, her options were extremely limited. Before she could make up her mind, the two boys she believed to be under her genjutsu grabbed both of her arms. Hinata now. Naruto yelled. When the two boys released Hinata, she landed on her back and watched as Naruto took the bells and distributed them to his teammates. Hinata wasted no time in charging forward and hitting multiple chakra points in her teacher's chakra system, effectively immobilizing her. How did the two of you simultaneously break the genjutsu? Kurenai inquired. I tied about 10 feet of wire to the both of us in case one fell under one of your genjutsus, so the other could fight while breaking the effected free, Naruto said, merely holding out the ninja wire that was bound to him and Akio. However, as he untied the wire from his waist, Naruto explained, Kyuubi was kind enough to break us out of it simultaneously since we both fell under. For the second time that day, Kurenai was taken aback when she saw that the nine-tailed fox had aided its container and its container's teammate, suggesting that the demon might not have been as horrible as the village had claimed. She gave herself permission to smile once more and said, Congratulations, you three passed my test. If it's okay with you, Hinata, you are now officially the ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village, Kurenai said. Hinata simply unblocked her chakra points and nodded softly. You three did a great job, Kurenai said. You have the rest of the day to do as you like. I'm going to report to the Hokage on your success. She vanished in a whirl of leaves. We'll start taking missions and training tomorrow. Yeah, we passed, woohoo! I'm done with school, what should we do now? Akio yelled, bouncing around like a fool. Totally composed from a half-second ago, he asked. We can go get a bite to eat. Naruto shrugged, adding, I know a place. Hinata stammered, that sounds nice and Naruto. After walking to Naruto's favorite restaurant in town, the three new genin sat down. What's new, old man? As the owner arrived to welcome them, Naruto uttered those words. How are you and your friends today? Ah, Naruto, my favorite customer, he inquired. We recently passed the genin test, Akio joyfully exclaimed. Well done, all three of you. As a treat, your orders are free. You have to earn some cash somewhere, don't you? Naruto has a 3-bowl limit on you. The man made a joke. With a small laugh, Naruto said, I understand you, don't worry. Before they finished their meal and departed, the three placed their orders and engaged in conversation. Her father was at the compound gate, staring at her with his icy eyes as Hinata walked alone to her home, which was in the opposite direction as her new team, and she didn't want to burden them. I am. Made genin tea. Today Father, she replied. Try not to be a hindrance to them, he said, turning and walking back inside while she flowed him. Who are they? Did he ask? She stammered, Akio Kiyoshi and N Naruto Yu Uzumaki. Hiyashi merely acknowledged with a grunt, seemingly unconcerned with Hinata's thoughts. How foolish she was. 99 missions have been completed by Team 6 since they were granted official ninja team status 1 month ago. Naruto felt a sense of pride in his work. Each mission had been finished swiftly and without any problems. He was going to change that today, even though he detested only receiving D-rank missions. After finishing a mission to get a cat for the ruler's wife or something, Team 6 was making their way to the Hokage Tower, but Naruto wasn't very concerned with the specifics. The feline was content with its calm and kind caretaker as it slept soundly in Hinata's arms. Naruto wondered how long it would take this time for the cat to get away from its owner. The cat tensed, almost anticipating what would happen, and would have leapt if Hinata hadn't given it a gentle pet as Team 6 ascended the stairs to the Hokage's office. When Hinata touched the cat, it relaxed and began purring. Sarutobi was going through his piles of papers when he said, Come in, through the door to his office. Team 6 reporting on a successful mission Hokage. Sama, was Kurenai's statement as Hinata reluctantly gave the cat to him. Very good Team 6, I am surprised that you caught. Yay, that's great, but I want a better mission, something higher than a crappy D-rank mission. Naruto replied. Naruto, Kurenai yelled. Despite her best efforts, Naruto remained extremely unruly around practically everyone he spoke to, with the exception of Hinata and Akio. Sarutobi remarked, You know, he may have a point, Kurenai. He still detested Naruto's lack of trust in him, and he hoped that by assigning him the new C-rank mission, his trust would increase. Fearing for her student's safety, Kurenai exclaimed, "Hokage Sama, you can't be serious. These kids are only a month out of the academy, and AC rank is still too dangerous." He grinned and remarked, "These kids have shown that they are more than capable of AC rank mission by now. Now you four are to escort a bridge builder back to his home in Wave Country so that he can finish a very important bridge. Does that sound good, Naruto?" He took the mission papers and gave them to Kurenai, saying only, "Perfect." After reading the mission briefing, Kurenai noticed something. She simply couldn't pinpoint what was missing. When Sarutobi pressed a button, the bridge builder was sent in by his assistant. "This is Tazuna, the bridge builder you will be escorting. Tazuna, this is the ninja squad that will be escorting you." Tazuna sighed as he glanced at the 4 ninjas in front of him, half intoxicated. These are ninjas. They look like babies beside the bigger chick. The little girl looks too shy to do anything, that kid in robes looks stupid, and the kid in black, what's up with him? Was he born fucked up or something? Said the man. Naruto advanced, his fists trembling a little. He leaned down to meet Naruto's eye level and sarcastically said, what is it, kid? Did I hurt your little feelings?" Before anyone knew it, Naruto was standing with his fist outstretched when Tazuna flew across the room and struck the wall hard. When Naruto pulled back his hood to reveal his ears and let his tail hang loose, he said, "You should not judge people by how they look, it could wind up costing you your life." Unable to stop the question from slipping from his lips, Tazuna backed as far away from the wall as he could, fear coursing through his veins. What are you?" Glaring down at Tazuna, Naruto remarked, "Me? Oh, I'm nothing special, just the container of the 9-tailed fox. I assume you don't have any more doubts about me or my team." Too frightened to respond verbally, Tazuna shook his head. Naruto said, "Good now, when do we leave?" "You will leave tomorrow morning. Your team will meet at the gates and head from there to Wave Country and oversee the completion of the bridge." "Oh, and Naruto, it's a good idea not to hurt your clients in the future, they may take their business elsewhere," Sarutobi stated. In response, Naruto said, "Whatever. Thank you for this opportunity, Hokage Sama," Akio replied. Hinata bowed and said, We are very grateful for this chance, Hokage Sama." "Very well, Team 6 accepts the mission, Hokage Sama," Kurenai replied. "However, I still feel uneasy about this." Just as Team 7 passed by with paint splatters on their clothing, Team 6 slowly left the room. Ignoring the cries that Kiba was to blame for Sakura's clothes getting dirty, Sasuke and Naruto glared at one another as they passed. Kurenai wished the others a good night's sleep as they departed the building for their homes. Akio just waved and grinned as he made his way back to his house. Because Naruto's apartment complex was at the end of the street, he and Hinata walked down the same one. After training or after missions, Naruto would typically just head home. However, today was different because he had another mission to get ready for. Naruto noticed a stranger observing Hinata as if he were a vulture observing an elderly man in the desert while they were strolling down the street. Given that Hinata was extremely well built for her age and that any man, unless they were related, would feel lustful just by looking at her, he didn't give it much thought. Naruto hoped, anyway. Hinata felt extremely uneasy as they passed the man because of the way he was staring at her. The man began to follow them as they passed him, focusing solely on Hinata. Naruto was fed up. Hinata partially hid behind him as he slowly turned around. Naruto asked as calmly as he could, "Can we help you?" The man licked his lips and said, "You can't, but that sexy girl behind you can." Now genuinely terrified, Hinata reflexively clutched Naruto's hand. Naruto cracked his knuckles after carefully releasing his hand. Naruto said slowly, "She isn't going anywhere with you." With a kunai in hand, the man rushed towards Naruto and asked, "Wanna bet?" Naruto said, "Hinata, cover your eyes." After all, she had complete faith in Naruto, so she promptly covered them. Naruto ducked the man's stab as soon as she had them covered, holding his arm high above him. Before a sword materialized where the ink had been, the man saw a bit of ink on Naruto's hand. Swiftly lowering his hand, Naruto severed the man's hand from his arm. The man lost his hand and fell to the ground, screaming in agony. Before performing a few hand signals for a fire jutsu, Naruto stood above him and gave him a fierce glare. It couldn't feel good to be burned alive, so the man closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. Naruto released his jutsu on the bleeding stump and raised the man's arm. The pain became unbearable for the man, who screamed and passed out. Naruto burned the man's hand to ash with another jutsu. Naruto kicked the unconscious man hard in the groin and remarked, "You're lucky I don't kill you for that." Naruto turned to Hinata, who was still wearing a mask over her eyes but was now trembling violently. He looked at her, and his face softened slightly. He could hardly ever be angry with her, though he didn't know why. As his swords vanished, he said, "It's okay, Hinata, it's over." Hinata slowly opened her eyes, gazed up at Naruto, and then slowly stood up and bowed to him. She said, Thank you so much and Naruto-kun. He merely nodded as they proceeded until Hinata arrived at her residence. Naruto was the first to speak. "I would like to see Hiyashi-sama for a minute." Reluctantly, the branch members complied with his request. Since his meetings weren't until later that day, Hiyashi emerged a few minutes later, unsure of who it might be. He looked at Naruto and Hinata, a little concerned about what might have happened because he was aware of his daughter's emotions and wasn't blind. "How may I help you?" "Hiyashi-sama, a few minutes ago your daughter was nearly ambushed by an older man. I stopped him before he did anything and have returned her safely to you," Naruto replied. Hiyashi was blown away. His daughter was touched by someone. Naruto Hiyashi would have been out on the streets searching for that scumbag himself if it had been anyone else. "I appreciate that, Naruto-san. In fact, I have a request for you." Naruto wanted to know. What might the family's head want him to do? Naruto inquired, "What is it?" "From now on I want you to walk my daughter to and from her missions and training sessions. I believe she will be safe with you. Will you accept?" replied he. After giving it some thought, Naruto saw no drawbacks to the idea and knew that those who tried it once would try again. Before heading to his apartment, he bowed and said, "I accept Hiyashi-sama. I will be here at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning for our mission Hinata." Naruto hurried to his apartment and began preparing for his upcoming mission. After all, he only needed some food rations and ninja supplies, so packing was simple. He lay down and closed his eyes to let sleep take over after he had finished packing. The following morning, Naruto woke up at 6. Since it would only take a few minutes to get to the Hyuga estate, he hopped in the shower and allowed the warm water to slowly awaken him. But as he did, he couldn't help but think about how the previous month had gone by. He discovered that humans weren't as horrible as he had assumed Akio and Hinata would be. He decided that he would feel safe with Akio and Hinata as friends watching out for him, even though he still didn't trust anyone else. Though he was still unsure of the reason, he felt a pull on his heart once more when he thought of Hinata. He simply brushed it aside, took a shower, and changed into his Go.to black and red ensemble. He hurried over to Hinata's house and explained his purpose to the guards. They accepted the older daughter right away after nodding. Naruto nodded as he saw her and began to make his way to the village gates. They discovered that everyone else had arrived before them. Kurenai said, "Everyone ready to go?" She grinned slightly when she saw their nods in her direction. "Then let's go to the land of Wave." They were still in Fire Country at the time, but the journey had been fairly mild and serene thus far. By the time they arrived at the border, things had changed somewhat. Everyone, except Tazuna, could sense that the puddle on the side of the road was a trick because Kurenai had taught them so much about chakra sensing and control. Nevertheless, one of the ninja's best weapons is deceit. As soon as everyone had passed the puddle, 2 ninja with chains fastened to their 2-clawed gauntlets leapt out of it and wrapped the chain around Kurenai, pulling it taut. As they pulled Kurenai apart with one last tug, one said, "One down." As they attempted to do the same to Tazuna, the other said, "Now for the bridge builder." 2 kunai impaled the chain to a tree as they charged Akio. The tree covers their necks just before they can strike the release mechanism. Kurenai's voice cries, "Demonic illusion! Tree binding death!" as her figure, holding a kunai in both hands, slowly emerges from the tree. But we killed you!" exclaimed one of the 2. Kurenai said, "Substitution." The other simply burst out laughing, "Hey brother." The other one answered, "Yay? We lost, I know. Give them nothing, wouldn't dream on it." Before turning to the bridge builder, Kurenai dropped the illusion covering the bodies and stabbed the kunais deep into their throats to prevent Tazuna and her tem from becoming ill. "You have some explaining to do." Tazuna nodded and went on to describe how his bridge was the only thing that could save his home, how Gato was threatening to destroy his town over money, and how his home was being driven into poverty. After considering it, Kurenai concluded that they ought to return. Naruto and the others, however, had a different plan. They claimed to want to finish the mission and remained by Tazuna's side. Kurenai reluctantly consented, and they set out on the boat that would take them to Wave County's boundaries, continuing the mission. As they disembarked, no one was going to miss the approximately 3-hour boat ride. They proceeded to stroll through the fog-covered woodland. "Something ain't right, this fog is way too thick," Tazuna replied. A nearby sound caused Naruto's ears to perk up. "Everybody down," he cried for everyone. As they struck the ground, a massive sword whirled past them and lodged itself in a tree trunk several feet above the ground. As its owner landed on the blade's hilt, a deep voice said, "Impressive boy. No one else has ever heard my sword like that before." Wearing ninja sandals, neck bindings that reached the bridge of his nose, and no shirt, he flaunted his scarred chest. The eyes of Kurenai widened as she uttered, "Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the mist." Zabuza gave a somber laugh. "I see my fame precedes me. I'm only going to ask this once, hand over the bridge builder." Gazing defiantly into Zabuza's eyes, Naruto remarked, "Sounded more like a demand to me." Naruto backed down. "That is an A-class missing ninja from the Hidden Mist village. We are not going to hand over Tazuna. He is under our protection, so the only way you will get him is over our cold corpses." Kurenai replied firmly. The people he lied to were willing to sacrifice their lives for him, which astounded Tazuna. He would find a way to pay them back once this was over. With resolute determination on their faces, Zabuza gazed down at each of them. It would be enjoyable. As he raised his hands in his favorite sign, he laughed even harder. A thick fog rolled over the six of them, and he said, "I guess I'll have to keep my end of the bargain, Leaf Ninja." Kurenai, trying to identify Zabuza's location, commanded, "Quickly, everyone form up around Tazuna. We have to protect him at all costs." In the meantime, Tazuna was surrounded by Akio, Hinata, and Naruto, all of whom were in combat positions. Zabuza's laughter reverberated around them. As his sword swung purposefully, missing her feet and slicing the ground, he uttered, "There are so many ways to kill you: decapitation, slicing your arteries, piercing your heart, the list just goes on and on." He pondered who he should target first, perhaps the girl. The man laughed when Hinata raised her arms and gave a little scream in response to Zabuza's scare tactic. "So scared, you three must be fresh from your academy," he exclaimed. He yelled as his sword swung near Naruto, "Maybe I'll go for the kid in black next." Taking the risk, Naruto thrust his kunai forward, driving it deep into Zabuza's chest. As the mist cleared and the battlefield became clear, Team 6's hopes increased. When water began to drip from the wound rather than blood, Zabuza laughed and fell into a pool of water. Kurenai revealed, "Water clone, Zabuza's second favorite technique. We have to be on the lookout. He would have to be close by and near water for that technique to be used." Above them, Naruto heard a faint rustling in the trees. He hurriedly shoved Hinata aside as Zabuza descended with his sword ready to sever one of the new genin with a single, powerful blow. Hinata could only see her crush and their attacker surrounded by a dense cloud of dust. When the dust settled, it became evident that Zabuza's attack had been halted by a sizable earthen wall, with his blade almost slicing through the rock. When Hinata turned to face Akio, she noticed that he had his hands on the ground and that the lines on his clothes appeared to be glowing light brown. His words were, "Naruto, now's your chance. I can't hold him there for long." After nodding and letting his hand drop to his side, Naruto raised two katana in his hands, but as he was about to attack, Akio's earth wall collapsed under the tremendous pressure of Zabuza. Naruto swiftly raised the swords to deflect Zabuza's fabled blade. As the blades collided, Naruto unconsciously closed his eyes and added chakra to his swords. The next sound was a painful, blood-curdling scream followed by the sound of steel slicing open skin. However, it was Zabuza, not Naruto, who was wounded. Blood was streaming from Zabuza's fresh wound, and a long slit ran up the middle of his chest where his blade had been sliced clean through. Zabuza leapt back and began to run, but Naruto pursued him right away because he would not let this opportunity pass and because Zabuza had a substantial bounty, even if he died. Naruto discovered it was a ruse by his opponent, but it was too late. Now, Zabuza was running through a series of hand signals while standing in the center of a lake. The water surrounding him began to slowly rise as he finished. Zabuza yelled, "Water style! Water dragon jutsu!" as a massive water dragon emerged from the lake, its red eyes gazing down at its prey before launching itself at the boy. Kurenai reached her blonde-haired student just as the water exploded on the floor. She was terrified. She was aware of that jutsu's strength. As Naruto ran towards Zabuza with his swords ready, she heard him curse and form the dragon for a second attack, allaying her fears. Though he was smarter than the boy, Zabuza crashed the dragon near Naruto, which caused the water to throw him off balance. Zabuza then ran through another set of hand seals, reaching out to Naruto as the boy was trapped in a huge sphere of water. Zabuza gave himself a moment of self-satisfaction because the boy was trapped. As several kunai were hurled at him from Kurenai, Zabuza leapt free of his prison hold on Naruto, breaking the jutsu. "Not bad, kid. It has been a while since anyone hurt me like that." Naruto hurried to her, prepared to devise a strategy. Now that he was hurt, exhausted, and outnumbered, Zabuza realized he was in trouble. He hurled several shuriken at Naruto, barely missing cutting his ears but severing enough of the surrounding fabric to cause the mask and hood to separate, exposing his face to his adversary. "Guess I underestimated you, boy. You're not too bad in a fight. It sucks that I'm gonna have to kill ya," he yelled. Zabuza charged the two, attempting to kill them with what was left of his sword, but 3 senbon needles flew out and hit him in the neck before he could reach his target's halfway. As his blood mingled with the water, he came to a halt and slowly fell face first into the water, floating motionless. Someone wearing ninja robes and a mask with the mist symbol carved into the forehead landed on one knee next to Zabuza's body before Naruto or Kurenai could reach it. As they lifted Zabuza onto their shoulder, the newcomer said calmly, "Thank you for weakening him for me. I have been on his trail for some time now and your battle made it easy for me to capture him." "Who are you?" yelled Naruto. As the stranger vanished in a gust of wind, they said, "I am a hunter ninja sent to capture Zabuza Momochi by the Mizukage." Kurenai glanced at her student and asked, "Naruto, are you okay?" Falling onto his face was Naruto's response. Just as Tazuna and the other members of Team 6 arrived, Kurenai swiftly flipped him over. Hinata questioned, Kurenai, Sensei W, what's wrong with Naruto?" Her eyes were worried as she looked up. "If we don't get him somewhere for me to help him soon, he could die." Kurenai hurried down to find her other 2 students after leaving the room where her near-dead student was kept. Tazuna had promptly stepped forward to extend a warm greeting to Naruto and his group. Kurenai spent hours trying to figure out why Naruto was in this state after they had him on a bed, but they were unsuccessful. But it was Hinata who ultimately discovered Naruto's weakness. As it turned out, he had been using the majority of his chakra to match the fabled missing ninja's speed during his fight with Zabuza. When he sliced through Zabuza's sword, which had so far caused the elder ninja great confusion, he nearly expended all of his chakra. How could a 12-year-old genin cut through that sword, which was not one to break easily? Kurenai was clueless as to how Naruto acquired a bloodline trait that was completely unheard of in the world. By combining his affinities for fire and wind, Naruto was able to produce what could only be characterized as plasma. Right now, she didn't dispute the science. Although this power had limitations, Naruto's system had so many of them that the new bloodline chakra was unstable and chakra exhaustion had set in. Generally speaking, a high affinity can become unstable and begin to harm the person. Finding someone of the opposite element and having them inject a shot of their own chakra into the system to stabilize the chakra was the best way to resolve this. The 2 opposites of Naruto's primary elements of fire and wind were necessary because he had an unstable sub-element. Kurenai had to hope for good fortune. Her hair was hanging in her face as she exclaimed, "Hinata, Akio, quick pour chakra into these slips of paper." Despite her agitated appearance, she had a serious expression on her face. Despite their desire to inquire about Naruto's condition, the 12-year-olds promptly poured a small amount of chakra into the papers as instructed by their sensei. Kurenai observed Hinata's paper getting wet and dripping. She thought, all right, Hinata's water counteracts Naruto's fire affinity. Come on, Akio, it's up to you. Akio's optimism skyrocketed as her paper began to fall apart. She dragged her students up to their teammate without wasting any time. She said hastily, "You two send a shot of your chakra into Naruto's system." Both of them nodded and followed instructions since they realized that this was not the time to inquire. With one hand on Naruto's stomach, Akio and Hinata directed their chakra into their friend's system. When Hinata activated her Byakugan, she was surprised by what she saw. The coils of Naruto's chakra had been scorched as it burned through his system like fire through kindling. The other, darker chakra then entered his system at the same time as his other chakra, attempting to repair the harm that had been done. However, each time it did so, the first chakra returned and burned the damaged area once more. He must have been in excruciating pain. At the same moment as Akio, she shook her head and sent a chakra blast into his system. They didn't seem to have done enough for a while. She noticed that Naruto's first chakra had dimmed and slowed its flow, halting the burning of his coils, just as she was about to add more. She observed as the second chakra got to work, gradually and cautiously healing the burns. Kurenai got up and grinned as she noticed Naruto loosen up a bit. Touching their shoulders tenderly, she said, "Come now children, Naruto needs his rest." Hinata remained kneeling by Naruto's side, shrugging off Kurenai's hand. Kurenai was initially taken aback, but then she grinned as she recalled the times she had behaved in such a way when someone she loved was harmed. As she slowly walked out of the room with Akio following, she said, "Come on Akio. Let's leave them alone for a bit." 6 days had passed since Naruto's little chakra jump, and although he was now sleeping, he showed no signs of rising. Hinata only left his side once to teach Kurenai the tree climbing exercise and once to carry out essential bodily tasks. She swiftly defeated it with her strong chakra control and then went back to Naruto's side right away. She really did love that boy, Kurenai would admit. Though not as frequently as Hinata. Akio also paid Naruto visits, and he simply couldn't figure out why she was there all the time. However, Tazuna asked Kurenai and her team to stay as soon as they arrived at his house, and they agreed, since today was the day he would start working on the bridge again. Kurenai noticed Naruto was simply sleeping after completing his recuperation. That was okay. She left a note outlining their location and directions because she couldn't wake him. As her team headed for the bridge, she had no idea what fate would await them. Something wasn't right as Tazuna and Team 6 minus Naruto entered the bridge. For starters, Tazuna's men were always working hard when he asked them to be on site, and no workers could be heard. Why weren't they present when he had informed them that they would resume construction on the bridge today? He knew he had given them the appropriate time. In the morning fog that encircled the bridge, two figures emerged, and Zabuza's dark laugh could be heard. Kurenai identified the second figure as they came into view. She looked at the person who had taken Zabuza away and remarked, "Hunter ninja huh? Not a bad front." Zabuza smirked beneath his wrappings and traced his hand over the large scar that ran up his chest, saying, "Where's the brat in black huh? I want revenge for this scar he gave me." Kurenai's eyes widened as Zabuza produced his sword, which appeared to be in perfect condition. She questioned, "How is that possible? I saw Naruto cut through the blade in your last fight." "So Naruto is the brat's name. That seems kinda lame for the boy that caused me so much trouble. I think I will just call him Black Fox. It suits him quite well, don't you think?" Zabuza laughed. "As to the question about my sword, that is a story for another day. Haku, deal with the two children, I don't need any distractions after all." Haku ran over to the two genin, who were running through hand signals, and said, "Yes Zabuza." Zabuza tossed a shuriken between Kurenai and the hunter ninja, interrupting Kurenai's attempt to stop them. Your fight is with me genjutsu mistress," Zabuza replied. In the hopes that both of her students would be okay, Kurenai slipped into her fighting stance. As he completed his seals, Haku remarked, "I am sorry I have to do this to two so young, but it is my master's orders." Akio and Hinata said, "Ice style. Crystal ice mirrors." As a dome of frozen mirrors gradually grew around them. After placing the final mirror, Haku slid into one and filled them all with his image. "Hinata?" inquired Akio. "It was, yay?" she said. He said, "I had a bad feeling about this," she said, me too. "Once more. Please come quickly, Naruto.kun." Naruto Kurenai had left Naruto a note, which he read when he finally woke up. They went to the bridge, and he was supposed to meet Tazuna's family there after waking up and leaving a couple shadow clones to watch over them. He walked downstairs after opening his room door when he heard someone kick open the door. One voice said, "This that bridge builder's home?" "That's what Gato said. Come on, let's find the brat and that whore mother of his and get back to Gato," the other person responded. Slowly, Naruto descended the stairs. Naruto remarked from the stairs, "If I were someone who valued my life, I'd leave." With their swords out, both men dashed for the stairs. They began to tremble when they saw Naruto standing there, his mask still smashed from his battle with Zabuza. The first one stammered, "Isn't T. that the G.guy Zabuza T. talked about?" One said, backing up slightly, I think we should get out of here." The first retorted, "No way, Gato would kill us." As Naruto looked down at them, he said, "So will I, if you don't leave." As he descended the stairs slowly, he said, "You have till I reach the bottom of those stairs to decide." The two men were terrified at every step he took. When the Fox Kid went toe-to-toe with Zabuza, he told everyone about it. The bottom was just one step away for Naruto. He unsheathed his swords and grinned ominously. As he landed on his feet after jumping and spinning over the two hired goons, he stabbed the men in the chest, piercing their hearts with his blades. Naruto chuckled softly as the two men fell to the ground, dead. All he said for the fallen men was, "Time's up." He heard a child's soft footsteps behind him just as he was ready to call forth two shadow clones. With a start, he turned around and fixed the new boy with his gaze. Naruto asked the young child, "Who are you?" The boy said in a melancholy tone, "You won't be able to do anything about Gato, you know. He's too powerful for anyone to take down. He can hire anybody for anything he wants. He is just going to kill Grandpa and then he will have you and your team killed too." The child exclaimed as he began to weep. "Just like my dad." Slowly, Naruto approached the now crying young boy. Now look, I don't know who your dad was, but do you think he would want you crying over his death? Or would he want you to be happy and spend time with your mother and grandfather? I had no family, I have been an orphan since the day I was born, and trust me, for myself, my home village is a far worse place than this one. And why is that? Because every day I was treated like a demon child, all because I have one sealed away inside me. Life isn't fair, but do you think I spend my time crying in my room? No, I am going to do something about it one day. Maybe you should do the same. Naruto continued as he left. The young boy said, Inari. Naruto looked back and said, excuse me? While sobbing, he repeated, my name it's Inari. With a slight smile, Naruto turned and left 2 shadow clones behind before leaving the room. Naruto, that's mine. Do you have a moment to talk, child? As Naruto began to run through the trees, the fox inquired. What is it, Sensei? Naruto answered. The fox grinned broadly and said, oh, I think you're going to like this, child. Your lineage has reawakened. It appears that combining your wind chakra with mine has given my fire chakra a significant power boost. The two can be combined to create a completely new sub-element. Plasm is the best way to describe it, the fox said. It appears that we will be engaging in some intense training when we return to your village, huh? As he disconnected the connection and concentrated on getting to his team, Naruto said to the fox, looks like it, Sensei, thank you for telling me. Team 6 for Team 6, things were not looking good. Haku had Hinata and Akio trapped, and Zabuza was preventing Kurenai from using any genjutsu. Zabuza nearly cut Kurenai in two as he swung down at her. Kurenai was panting heavily. It was no secret that she was not the greatest taijutsu expert in history, but she had believed that she was healthy enough to survive a battle without genjutsu for at least a short while. Zabuza approached Kurenai slowly while grinning ominously through his wrappings. Zabuza declared, I have you cornered now. It was true that Kurenai was surrounded by steel or concrete, and there was nothing to replace it. As Zabuza raised his sword, she closed her eyes. Zabuza laughed and remarked, it was fun playing genjutsu mistress, but playtime's over now. Haku had been hurling needles at Hinata and Akio inside the ice dome. The young boy found the small earth dome that Akio had brought up to be a taxing jutsu. Haku continued to hurl needles at the dome, but he began using ice needles rather than his metal ones, and he continued to bombard the earth's dome with them. Cracks appeared in his dome, and Akio could feel his chakra waning. With a strained voice, Akio said, sorry Hinata, it doesn't look like I'm gonna get out of here. The dome fell. As he fell to the ground, Haku stabbed him with multiple senbon needles, and he said, tell Naruto I'm sorry. Naruto's voice exclaimed, Akio. As he infused his swords with plasma chakra, sliced through one of the mirrors, and then landed beside his fallen comrade. Naruto shook his friend slightly and said, you're getting out of this, Akio. I promise, just keep yourself safe. Naruto put Akio down and clenched his fists when he didn't answer. As his ire toward the boy in the mirrors grew, Naruto said, Hinata, keep his body safe, okay? Holding Akio's body close to her, Hinata began to cry and nod her head. Haku said in a tone devoid of emotion, I am sorry for the loss of your friend, but it is the will of my master, Zabuza. Naruto stood trembling as his eyes developed a black ring around them. The white in his eyes had turned red, and the black had grown to fill in the space left by the red. Shut up. Just shut up, I'm going to kill you, Naruto cried as he leapt in the direction of a mirror and punched through it. Before the punch came, Haku had leapt to another mirror, but Naruto continued to slam through them. When the fox's chakra was released, Kurenai and Zabuza forgot they were fighting and focused entirely on Naruto. This time, before Haku could jump, Naruto crashed through another mirror and punched the boy hard in the face, breaking his mask as he did so. A ripple crack indicated where Naruto landed after he leapt hard on Haku. Parts of the mask began to chip away rapidly as Naruto continued to hurl punch after punch into Haku's face. When Haku's mask finally came off, Naruto clasped both of his hands together and held them high above his head, his face smeared with his own blood. Haku closed his eyes in anticipation of the last agony before passing away, but it never materialized. He opened his eyes slowly and was astounded by what he saw. Although they were only an inch from his face, Naruto's fists were not getting any closer. At that moment, he heard faint sobs coming from behind Naruto and saw a pair of arms wrapped around his stomach. As she held Naruto closer, Hinata cried, Pages, please Naruto, don't, please stop it. Akio wouldn't want you to do this, please stop it, Naruto. Haku's eyes returned to normal as he gazed at Naruto, his fists dropping to his slides. Naruto placed his hands over Hinata's as he slowly reached for hers. He got to his feet slowly and turned to look at her. She continued to sob as she buried her head in his chest. Unconsciously, Naruto began massaging her back in an effort to soothe her. Grinning, Haku rose slowly to his feet. Have good news for you too, your friend isn't dead. I can never bring myself to kill one so young. Naruto gazed down at the older boy. I swear to Kami, if you're lying then not even Hinata will be able to stop me from killing you, he replied. As Naruto began to remove the needles, Haku remarked, the needles are not anywhere vital, but he will be out for a little bit longer once those needles are removed. Just as an arrow sank directly into Zabuza's heart, Haku's head suddenly jumped up and he twisted behind him. Zabuza felt blood splash onto his back and spun around. He saw the boy with an arrow in his heart, one that was intended for him, and he said, Haku? As blood trickled from the wound, Haku gave Zabuza a slow smile. As Zabuza laid him on the ground, the light dwindling from his eyes, Haku said, It's okay Zabuza, I was broken tool now anyway. ITW. Was the least I circa could do for you. Zabuza raised his head, trying to find the shooter. He was about to look when Gato and his 10,000 hired goons entered the viewing range, Gato holding a bow without an arrow, when he heard a laugh coming from the fog. Guess my accuracy is better than I thought. Gato replied. He was short, had brown hair, and wore sunglasses that went well with his business suit. Zabuza slowly lifted his head off the ground to gaze at his friend who had died. The Zabuza said, Hey, Black Fox. Kurenai gave Naruto a gentle prod to let him know that Zabuza was referring to him. According to Naruto, what Zabuza? Zabuza smirked evilly as he turned his head. Let's see who can get the most kills. Smirking, Naruto gathered his swords and moved to stand beside Zabuza. He channeled his bloodline into his swords, giving them a spooky blue glow, and remarked, You got a deal. Both of the demon ninja charged into the fray, slashing at anything that was human. They both cut through every enemy they came across, causing the blood to flow into the water below from the bridge's gutter system. In the hopes that one of the individuals he had hired would be able to stop the two ninja, Gato began to run to the rear of the group. You could hear the screams of pain and the searing of skin and meat from the plasma as Naruto's blade tore through his foes. Zabuza's adversaries fared considerably worse. Zabuza's victims were slowly bleeding to death unless he delivered a fatal blow, while Naruto's blades were cauterizing the wounds. As the two ninjas closed in on the little man, Gato watched in horror as pieces of his body were flung into the air. Before Zabuza's blade sliced him in two, the small businessman had one final thought as he sliced through the remaining foes standing between him and Gato. Fuck me. As he cooled off from his outburst, Zabuza inhaled deeply. He walked to Haku's side after turning around. He closed the ice ninja's eyes as he knelt beside his fallen partner and then picked up his body. He said, a sad expression on his face, Would you leaf ninja want to join me in honoring him? In an attempt to reassure the man, Hinata moved forward and put her hand on his arm. She smiled sorrowfully and said, I would be honored. She believed that if circumstances had been different, they could have become friends even though they had been enemies in the boy's final moments. Akio moaned as he eventually regained consciousness, and Naruto and Kurenai nodded. He saw the enemy holding Haku's body and Hinata near the older man and said, what happened, what I miss? With a tone that was a little dejected, Naruto said, Long story, I'll tell you on our way back. Get cleaned up. We have a funeral to go to. Zabuza moved slowly in the direction of the little funeral pyre he and Team 6 had constructed for Haku. After placing the boy atop the kindling and small logs, he took a step back and took Naruto's torch. As Team 6 bowed their heads in acknowledgement, Zabuza stated, Haku was a good-natured, compliant, and eager shinobi. He believed someone became perfectly strong when they have someone important to protect. Despite his talent for battle and incredible abilities, Haku disliked needing to kill others as his role as my tool, and avoided doing so whenever possible. I guess that came from his father trying to kill him after his mother, but I can't be too sure, Zabuza said as he started to cry. As he lit the pyre, he remarked, Haku, you were the best shinobi anyone could ask for, and I am proud to have called you my friend. One could see the sadness in Zabuza's eyes and the tears streaming down his cheeks if they looked closely. I hope you make it to the afterlife with no regrets, my friend. Goodbye, Haku. Team 6 remained respectful of the fallen shinobi, and Naruto pondered Haku's ideas on strength. As Zabuza silently prayed for his friend while he watched the pyre burn, he considered that thought. Zabuza wiped his eyes dry as the pyre burned out and only ash remained. Zabuza said, I should get going now. Kurenai inquired, Where will you go, Zabuza? To which Zabuza replied, I don't know. It feels like I shouldn't keep going for my goal of overthrowing the Mizukage, but I don't know what else to do. Akio exclaimed, come back to the hidden leaf with us. With haste, Zabuza said, no thank you, I would not be welcome there anyway. Naruto looked at the older man and said, Zabuza, I promise you that one day I will make sure that you get the home you desire. The child's words caused Zabuza to smile slightly. He wasn't sure why, but he knew he would honor his word. Thank you child, I look forward to that day. Kurenai began walking back to Tazuna's house to retrieve the team's belongings, saying, come on children, we need to get going. Without Gato threatening this town and Zabuza no longer trying to kill the bridge builder, we can rest easy knowing the bridge will be completed safely. Kurenai was closely followed by Hinata and Akio. After a minute with Zabuza, Naruto turned slowly and started to follow Kurenai. Hey Zabuza! Exclaimed Naruto. What? He asked. Naruto joked, don't get soft on me, as he continued to move. Zabuza gave a little laugh. That kid, he is one of a kind. As Team 6 got closer to the village gates, the return trip to the Leaf Village had gone smoothly. The illusion that concealed the Demon Brothers' rotting bodies had fallen, and that was the only difference. Akio puked at the sight, and Hinata buried her face in Naruto's chest. As Kurenai put it, Naruto. Naruto replied with a grunt. Kurenai let out a long sigh and resumed her speech. You know I will have to tell the Hokage and council about your bloodline. He said, do whatever you need to. They can't do anything about it anyway. As Kurenai put it, also Hinata. Why? Yes. She said doctrinally. She could see the direction of this. We are going to be training you so that you won't have to rely on your team as heavily for support, okay? She replied with a grin. As she looked at the ground, Hinata realized that she was a liability to the team and that neither Akio nor Naruto would benefit from her presence going forward. Well, if you are gonna train Hinata-sensei, then who is gonna train me and Naruto? Replied Akio. Naruto declared, I can train by myself. I don't want you or Hinata to be hurt by my plasma element. Kurenai smiled and admitted, Akio, I do know the shadow clone jutsu. I can train you and Hinata at the same time. Naruto extended his hand to Hinata and said, Kurenai, I must return Hinata home now. Kurenai raised an eyebrow as she blushed as she took it. Okay, but why is that your responsibility? I am sure that Hinata can walk home by herself, she asked. It was Hiashi's request that I escort her home and to training or team rendezvous, replied Naruto. Okay, if that's the case, meet up at our training ground at 8 o'clock in the morning tomorrow, okay? She said. He led Hinata down the street to her house and said, okay, come on Hinata, let's go. Even though it was close to the main entrance, Naruto took his time moving. Hinata enjoyed having her hand in Naruto's, so she didn't mind. As they got closer to the compound, Hinata felt Naruto's hand slip from hers. When Naruto and Hinata reached the gate and went to fetch Hiashi, the two branch members nodded at them. Kurenai went to the Hokage's office to deliver her report shortly after her team left for their homes. She was unsure of the council's response but knew it would be negative. She thought about how she could gain Naruto's trust as she made her way up the stairs to the Hokage's office. He somehow fell in love with Akio and Hinata. That was something she longed to be a part of. She vowed to herself that she would one day be as close to Naruto as Akio and Hinata were because the three of them seemed so complete when they were together. Kurenai gently knocked on the Hokage's office door, praying she wasn't disturbing anything crucial. From behind the door, the elderly Kage's voice said, come in, the door's open. Kurenai opened the door and, hello Hokage. Sama, how have you been? Sarutobi exclaimed joyfully, ah Kurenai. I have been well, how about you and your team? They are good, I believe they are recovering from the trip as we speak, she responded. Good, good, don't want the youth of this village leaving us before their time now, do we? He joked. Kurenai gave a small laugh before responding. No, no, you're right, that would be horrible. He said courteously, may I see the mission report please? As she passed the folder containing the details of their mission, Kurenai nodded. The elderly man's expression gradually grew increasingly anxious as he read it. It was almost as though he had been reading a dramatic novel. After finishing, he put it down and gave Kurenai a serious look. He questioned, everything in this report is true? Kurenai answered, 100% Hokage, Sama. He sighed deeply and turned to face his helper. Please gather the council and Naruto Uzumaki, we have something important to discuss with the boy, he responded. After giving a nod, the assistant vanished in a gust of wind. Kurenai, please go and gather the other Jonin Sensei for me. I have something I need to talk to them about, Sarutobi asked. Of course Hokage. Sama, no problem, should I return here as well? She responded. He nodded briefly in response, and she left to fetch her fellows. Naruto deep in thought, Naruto sat on his bed. If he wanted to use the plasma bloodline effectively, he needed to come up with at least 10 different methods. But that would have to wait because someone knocked on his door. He stood up and cautiously opened the door. When he saw the ninja at his door, he exclaimed, "What?" "The Hokage has requested I take you to the council chambers, Naruto-san," the individual responded. After rolling his eyes, Naruto went outside and began to move. Naruto and the assistant headed to the council chambers, where he said, "Let's get this over with." Parts, clan heads and council civilian representatives sat in a broad half-circle, watching their Hokage and waiting for him to explain why he had summoned them. As Naruto entered and stood by the Hokage, they noticed a door open and then close. Naruto remarked, "He said you needed me, what for?" Questions about the identity and nature of the bloodline were raised when Sarutobi said, "I gathered you all today because it appears that a new bloodline has surfaced in one of our shinobi. This bloodline is a brand new sub-element that can only best be described as plasma. So far I have no other information except that it granted the wielder the ability to cut through solid steel as if they were cutting through reeds." Sarutobi continued. With growing impatience, Danzo inquired, "Who is the owner of this new bloodline? At all costs, he would have this lineage in his root division." As he moved aside to let Naruto take center stage, Sarutobi remarked, "That would be our young genin, Naruto Uzumaki." Sarutobi grinned at the boy who had grown so powerful so quickly. Naruto. Everyone was shocked to learn that the demon child had a new bloodline. How is this possible? What else was this bloodline capable of? Danzo was already formulating plans to use the boy for his own purposes. Danzo uttered the words slowly, "Let me guess, boy." Naruto simply stared at the older man. "You don't know anything about this bloodline, right?" Danzo said, "I'll take that as a yes." "Well then why not have someone help you with controlling it? I could easily help you out." There was no way he would refuse the boy if he was as hungry as he believed. Naruto said, "No, may I go now?" Everyone would have jumped at the chance to learn from the legendary Danzo of the Hidden Leaf Village, but Danzo was stunned. One council member exclaimed, "No, how do we know he is even telling the truth?" Another countered, "That's right, he could be lying, he is part fox after all." A civilian remarked, "He should prove it exists." Sarutobi eventually gave in and demanded that some sheets of steel be brought in after numerous other requests for him to demonstrate the existence of his bloodline. He turned to Naruto and stood them side by side on their ends. He questioned, "Is this enough for you, Naruto?" In the center of the room was a 14-inch thick steel block made up of 7 steel plates, each of which was about 2 inches thick. Naruto opened his swords and poured his chakra into them, saying, "That's fine." All of the civilian members sat there grinning, waiting for Naruto to falter or back down. Naruto easily cut through every block in a single motion before putting his swords away. He was irritated that he hadn't had time to analyze or even consider Haku's beliefs. "Now can I go?" he asked. As Sarutobi put it, "Yes Naruto, you may go now, thank you." With the doors shutting firmly behind him, Naruto walked out of the room and at last allowed his thoughts to settle on Haku's. Unfortunately, as he was leaving the Hokage building, he ran into someone and would not have time to think things through. He continued to walk, assuming it was just a villager. "Hey!" a voice from out of the blue exclaimed. "It's rude for people to bump into others and not even acknowledge them, you know." Slowly turning around, Naruto gazed down at the older-looking boy. His entire outfit was black, with the exception of the purple war paint on his face. A girl with blonde hair in 4 tiny ponytails, about the boy's age, was standing next to him. She had a red sash around her waist that held the battle fan in place, and she wore an off-white overcoat with fishnet underneath. She sighed deeply and said, "Kankuro, why do you have to start with the locals?" Staring down at Naruto, Kankuro said, "Shut it, Damari, he bumped into me and I want him to apologize. Go on kid, say it." Naruto grinned and said, "I'm sorry, you were too foolish to watch where you were going." Kankuro screamed, "What did you say, you little punk?" and grabbed Naruto's shirt collar. After grabbing the boy's wrist, Naruto turned around and pressed the boy's arm against his back. He pressed the boy's arm to his back further, causing the boy to cry out in pain, and said, "If you value your arm, don't touch me again." The voice was dry as it said, "Kankuro, why must you disgrace our village?" According to Tamari, Gara, Naruto gazed at the source of the voice. A boy about Naruto's age was standing on a tree branch. He had a love symbol above his left eye and red hair. His pale blue eyes conveyed pain and hatred to everyone in his path. He had a white scarf that hung down to his waist, black pants that matched his shirt, and a black shirt with 2 straps holding a gourd in place on his back. Naruto pushed Kankuro away towards Temari as he leapt down from the branch, and both of them began to tremble when Gaara appeared. Gaara and Naruto gazed at one another, observing the suffering and anguish endured by the other. Gaara remarked, "You are like me." As he left to go home, Naruto answered, "So you think?" He had the unshakable impression that Gaara was more dangerous than she appeared. In the office of the Hokage, the 4 Jonin in front of Sarutobi were asked, "I assume you know why I called you all here?" Knowing the answer, Asuma questioned, "It's about the Chunin exams, isn't it?" "Very good, Asuma. As you all know, the Chunin exams are upon us, and I was wondering if you had suggestions for teams to participate," the elderly Kage responded. Kurenai, Guy, Asuma, and Kakashi all made the move so that their teams could take part. Kurenai studied Asuma and Guy intently. Asuma's black hair appeared to be constantly blown back by the wind and simply cascaded down around his chin as a beard. Under his Jonin vest, he wore a blue shirt and pants that were typical of shinobi. However, the piece of cloth that hung around his waist and featured the red kanji for fire inside a black circle was what made him most distinctive. He wore his headband around his forehead as usual. Guy, however, was dressed in a single green jumpsuit with bright orange arm and leg warmers. He was wearing his jumpsuit over his Jonin vest. His black hair appeared to have been trimmed with a bowl. He had decided to wear his headband as a belt by taking the metal plate off the blue cloth and fastening it to his old favorite red belt, and his eyebrows were abnormally large. "Are you all sure on your team's abilities? This isn't any old test. Teams have died in this exam before," Sarutobi cautioned. Kurenai declared, "Team 6 is defiantly ready for the Chunin exams." Asuma smiled and said, "So is Team 10. Guy gave a thumbs up and stated, "Team Guy is ready as well." Kakashi took the little orange book out of his pocket and declared, "Team 7 is more than ready for the test, Hokage Sama." Kurenai yelled, "I warned you, Kakashi," and grabbed the orange book from the one-eyed ninja. As she pulled a lighter from Asuma's pocket and lit the book on fire, Kakashi's eyes widened. Kakashi screamed, "No," as his book turned to ash. Sarutobi, who was a little worried about Kakashi's response to the book burning, said, "Well then, I will add your teams to the list of participants then. Let your teams know that the Chunin exams will begin in 2 weeks." Deep in contemplation, Naruto lay on his bed and gazed at the ceiling. "I question whether Haku's method was correct. Do you feel more powerful when you have others to defend? What would happen if the enemy got hold of them if you valued them so highly?" "Child," the fox said, "you would just have to stop them before that happens. For instance, you didn't let anything happen to that Hyuga maid of yours. She's not Kyuubi. Sensei, my mate." The fox was informed by Naruto that she was merely a friend. "Kid, are you attempting to persuade me, are you?" the fox inquired. Naruto was taken aback by the question, primarily because he was at a loss for an answer. A knock on his door interrupted him as he was about to delve deeper into his thoughts about Hinata. He rose slowly and made his way to his door, wanting only to unwind and reflect on everything that had happened thus far. Kurenai was standing there grinning as he opened the door. "Yes, Kurenai?" inquired Naruto. "Well, aren't we straight to the point today?" "Very well. I just got back from the Hokage's office. He wanted to know if anyone had teams willing to participate, so I put Team 6 forward. You guys are ready for this, I can feel it," Kurenai replied. Naruto inquired, "Will the Uchiha be participating?" She smiled and added, "Team 7 was nominated as well." A smirk appeared on Naruto's face. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow. I will be training Hinata and Akio's family will be training him in some of their techniques. Do you want to join me in Hinata?" she asked. "I will, but I'm going to be practicing my bloodline, so I will be staying a distance to keep you two out of harm's way," he replied. "It's a start, at least," Kurenai thought cheerfully. She smiled and said, "Good, meet us at training ground 68 at 7 in the morning." Naruto bowed to Kurenai and said, "Okay, I'll be there." He then slowly shut the door. After 3 weeks as usual, Naruto got up early and went about his morning business. He reflected on his development since graduating from the academy as he got into the shower. He engaged in a number of D-rank and A-rank missions, faced off against an A-rank missing ninja, eliminated half of Gato's goon squad, discovered his bloodline, and even developed a number of strategies for it. He had made great progress. For a moment, his thoughts strayed to Hinata. He wasn't sure how he should feel about the heiress from Hyuga. She was his friend, no doubt, but she couldn't possibly feel anything else for him. Konoha's demon child, could she? It would be entirely unprecedented. She could have anyone she wanted because of her kindness and beauty. Did he just acknowledge that she was attractive? "All right, I'll confess that I have feelings for Hinata," Naruto told himself. "Aha! I knew. The fox yelled. Indeed, you were correct. However, what if she has different feelings about me? Naruto inquired. You're seeking advice on love from the most powerful demon on the planet? Do you feel okay, kid? He inquired. As he left to meet up with his team at the academy, Naruto told the fox, never mind Kyuubi. Sensei, never mind. He walked slowly in the direction of the academy, giving the girl more thought and attempting to determine his feelings for her. Did it involve more than just a close friendship? He avoided those thoughts by shaking his head. Kurenai didn't need to come get Hinata because he had taken her out for some extra training prior to the tests. He had heard from the two that Hinata was improving her fighting skills and that Kurenai had even taught her how to use some genjutsu. She would undoubtedly be prepared for the tests, even though he didn't know much more about her training. Upon entering the courtyard of the academy, he saw Akio standing in a corner, gazing up at the sky. Naruto joked, didn't know you would be this lost without me. Akio responded with a joke, oh haha mister, I don't show my face to anyone. As he extended his hand, Akio inquired, how are you Naruto? Grabbing Akio's hand and placing his free hand on his shoulder, Naruto responded, I'm anxious to get started, that's for sure. The boy reciprocated. Akio inquired, what do you think the exams will be like? From behind them, a recognizable voice said, well, if it's anything like last year's exam, it will be 3 parts. Glancing over his shoulder, Akio said, hey Kurenai. Sensei. What were the 3 parts last year? She smiled and said, sorry, I can't tell you, that's something you will have to find out for yourselves. According to Naruto, where is Hinata? Hinata awoke from behind Kurenai and said, I'm right here. Kurenai vanished in a whirl of leaves, saying, well, I should let you 3 go then. The test is in room 301, good luck. After Kurenai left, Hinata and Akio followed Naruto as he made his way to the academy doors. They saw a group of genin gathered around the door, with 2 Chunin guards informing them that the test had already begun, as they ascended the first flight of stairs. With Hinata and Akio trailing behind him, Naruto simply shook his head and went on up the stairs. They didn't deserve to be here in the first place if they weren't intelligent enough to recognize the obvious genjutsu. A group of ninjas turned to look at Team 6 as they entered room 301. Naruto observed the various headbands as he observed them. He could see Sasuke's team staring at some of the headbands from the Leaf Village, some from the Grass Village, some from the Sand, and some from a few other villages whose names he didn't recognize. The symbol on these headbands was represented by a musical note. Someone said, well hello there, you 3 must be new here. As Naruto searched for the source of the voice, he saw a figure approaching him. Although Naruto had never seen him before, he had gray hair pulled back behind his head and was wearing a Leaf Village headband. He was wearing a blue sleeveless shirt underneath a plain gray t-shirt, and he was wearing spectacles. He was wearing wrappings around his stomach and a pair of gloves that reached his elbows. He took out a deck of cards and said, my name is Kabuto and I'd be glad to help you 3 out. Naruto asks in a monotone, what are those? These are my special ninja information cards. I can tell you anything you want about anyone you want, so, any takers? Kabuto responded. The door suddenly flew open, and a man who was at least 6 feet tall entered, followed by 10 or more Chunin. He had his headband tied up like a bandana and was wearing a long black trench coat. However, the 2 scars that ran down his face were his most obvious features. That's enough, exclaimed the man. I am Ibiki Morino, head of the interrogation department of Anbu, and right now, I'm also the proctor for the first part of your exams. Now, the first part of the exam is written. Oh come on. Despite the outburst, Ibiki said, moving on. There are 10 questions on this test. Each are worth 1 point for a total of 10. If a proctor catches you cheating, that's 2 points off your test. If you're caught 3 times, you fail. And if you fail, then so does your team. Each member of your team must answer at least 1 question correctly or else you fail. The 10th question will be given to you 15 minutes before the end of the test. Any questions? He clarified as everyone sat down. All right then. Start the exams. All right, then. Start the exams, exclaimed Ibiki. Every genin turned their paper over as soon as Ibiki finished speaking, only to discover the 9 most difficult questions they had ever encountered. You must be joking with me, Konkuro reflected. To even receive these responses, you would need to be a Chunin, Sakura called out to herself. I detest written assessments. Akio let out a mental scream. Akio was in the front row, 1st seat, Hinata was in the 8th row, and Naruto was in the 3rd row, 4th seat back. One benefit of having the strongest demon imprisoned within you is that Naruto knew the answers, but he was unable to assist his team with them dispersed in that manner. Naruto? Black Fox. Uzumaki was unable to assist his team for the first time since joining Team 6. Hinata didn't understand why the test's questions were so difficult. She knew how to answer them because of her clan's training, but she was certain that Akio and Naruto would require assistance. She debated briefly with herself before using her Byakugan to check on Akio and Naruto. She was shocked to learn that Naruto had completed all 9 questions. He was merely pretending to be someone who was watching him. That's it. This was more of a test of your ability to gather information covertly than a written exam. She needed to inform the boys, but how would she go about doing that? Akio pondered how he was going to receive even one response as he sat there with the proctor looking down at him. There were 2 genin in his row of seats who shared his lack of knowledge. How in the hell am I going to pass? Naruto will definitely kill me if I fail for the team. And then there's what parents would do if they learned. Oh my god, this is awful. Hinata's voice reverberated in his ear just as he was about to give up. Akio, don't give up, this isn't really a written exam, she replied. Hearing his teammate's voice so abruptly startled him, but he remained composed. I used a genjutsu. To everyone but me it would seem as if nothing changed, but really I am right next to you. Now write down E. Exactly as I tell you, okay? She said with a stutter. Akio acknowledged her with a hum that gave the impression that he was thinking deeply. Leaning back in his chair, Naruto did nothing but kill time. The fox remarked, "Kid, that Gaara kid has been staring at you the whole time." Naruto answered, "Let him stare, if we fight, I'll crush him." Don't become conceited, kid. You can't even keep a small portion of my power. That should be sufficient to defeat him, right? Naruto inquired. I don't know, I can't put my finger on it, but I feel a familiar chakra signature coming from him, the fox uttered. Naruto said, okay, Kyuubi. Sensei, I'll be careful, but don't worry, I won't die. The fox teased, you had better not, because your mate would be very upset. She is not my mate. As he severed the mental connection, Naruto yelled. He checked the time and saw that the entire time spent with the fox had consumed almost all of the test time. He didn't know why the fox made it take so long, but at least he wouldn't have to wait long for this section to end. At least half of the teams had been eliminated, he noticed as he looked around. Although he wasn't a major concern, Kabuto made it as well, and he grinned when he saw Sasuke still there. But like water from a sink, the boy next to him was displaying killer intent. When Naruto looked at the boy, he saw that it was another Hyuga. He wore a headband around his forehead and had long black hair. He was dressed in standard ninja shorts and a tan shirt with wrappings down his right arm. But who could make a Hyuga so angry? They were meant to be the best at controlling their emotions. Naruto was startled to see who the boy was glaring at after following his gaze. It was well known that the branch family detested the main family, but Naruto was unaware of how intense their animosity was. The boy was staring at Hinata as if he were trying to set her off right then and there. Ibiki slammed his hand down on the desk, bringing Naruto back to the present. Alright, time for the 10th question. He responded. However, before I give you it, know this, if you get the 10th question wrong you fail and will not be allowed to partake in the Chunin exams again. He yelled. He grinned as the different complaints about how unjust he was were heard. Who said life was fair? Now I will give you a choice. You can stay and take the question or you can leave now and try again next year. The children left the room after several hands flew up. Ibiki listed the 26 teams that were left. Since no one seemed to be considering quitting at this time, Ibiki said, so all of you want to answer the 10th question? They would all make excellent Chunin. He said, congratulations, you all pass. Akio questioned, but what about the 10th question? There is no 10th question, it was to see if you were going to continue even with the threat of forever being a genin. Ibiki clarified. At Ibiki's explanation, Akio repeatedly slammed his head against the desk, and the proctor, like several of the foreign genin, simply stared at the boy in bewilderment. Ibiki was about to inquire about the boy's mental state when glass shattered and cruel laughter accompanied the detonation of smoke bombs. As the smoke cleared, a woman's voice said, damn Ibiki, let enough of them pass. I think you're going soft on me. Ibiki said, a little irritated, no, they're just that good, and for Kami's sake can't you use a door or an open window instead of smashing through one? The woman said, now where's the fun in that? When the smoke finally cleared, a woman wearing a trench coat, a long fishnet shirt, matching fishnet shorts, and a short brown skirt was seen. The shirt barely covered her breasts. As far as Naruto could tell, she had light brown eyes and somewhat medium violet hair. With a loud voice, she said, okay, listen up. She mumbled something about paying for new windows as she walked out the door, saying, my name is Anko Mitarashi and I am the proctor for the second part of the exams, now follow me. The strange woman led all 26 teams of Chunin hopefuls to a fenced-in area of woods. With a sick smile, Anko greeted them, "Welcome to Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death." She took a blue and a white scroll out of her coat pocket and said, "This is where you will be taking the second part of these exams, your goal. Well, to get one of these scrolls, whatever one you don't get is the one you need. Once you have both the Heaven Scroll and the Earth Scroll, you need to report to the tower in the dead center of the forest." She continued, "Now first you have to sign these waivers so that if you die here then the Hidden Leaf isn't responsible for your deaths. Any questions?" she inquired. Some of the kids appeared frightened, but not enough to flee. As the genin waited in line to retrieve their scrolls, she said, "No? Good. Now go get your waiver and scroll behind one of those curtains, then report to the gate number you were assigned." Naruto had an idea as Team 6 approached the booth that would enable them to finish this considerably more quickly than the other teams. He didn't intend to die today, so he swiftly signed the waiver. The Haven Scroll was given to Akio and Hinata after they followed suit. Naruto turned to Hinata as they left the curtain. "Hinata, can you use your Byakugan to see what team has what scroll?" asked he. Then she said, "Why? Yes I can." He said, "Good, do it when I say so, alright?" "Oh, okay," was her response. As they positioned themselves at gate number 10, she thought, Naruto-kun has trusted me with something that affects our entire chance of passing, and I can't let him down. Next, Anko said, "Alright, just one thing before you start," and the gates swung open. "Just don't die." The team to their left was intercepted by Team 6 in turn. Although they were a few unnamed sound shinobi, Naruto wanted to end this pointless, exaggerated scavenger hunt, and they had the Earth Scroll that Team 6 required. Naruto questioned, "Akio, do you have any jutsu that can wear them out?" A smirk appeared on Akio's face as he remarked, "Oh, I think I know one. Earth style. Stone Golem Jutsu," he exclaimed after demonstrating a few hand signals. The three fell slightly backwards as the earth exploded in front of the sound crew, who were just walking along the forest floor. As the dust began to settle and reveal three shadows, the person in front of them asked, "What the hell was that about? Hey, looks like we got some punks who think they're tough boys." Before the dust settled and the stone golems were revealed, the three began to laugh. Each golem had no distinguishing characteristics and stood 7 feet tall. A large upside-down triangle shaped stone was used for the chest and waist area. A small oval stone was used for the head, and 2 round rocks formed the hands of each of the 3 humanoid beings. The feet were flat, the arms and legs were long and thick, and each limb had 2 stones for more human-like movement. The sound crew thought the golems were merely training dummies for a brief moment because they didn't move. That was altered when the sound crew was charged by 2 ovals of light that appeared on the golems' heads. The golem dropped its fist where the boy was, leaving a deep crater from the impact, and the ninja backflipped with one sound. Although the golems weren't too slow to pose a threat, they weren't quick enough to keep the ninjas constantly on guard. The golem attempted to launch another slamming attack after striking the boy's chest with a forceful blow. Just in time, the sound ninja rolled away from the golem's attack. With a quick thought, he stood up and kicked the golem in the chest with a great deal of chakra behind it. It cost a lot, but it managed to raise its arm in time to catch the kick. The rock that served as its arm exploded into multiple shards as the kick made contact, and the boulder that served as its hands fell to the ground due to the chakra transfer. His teammates heard him exclaim, "Guys, with enough chakra you can destroy these things' limbs," as he accumulated more chakra for a subsequent attack. The last of Akio's earth golems were being eliminated by Team 6 as they reached their targets. The sound crew had a semi-high level of chakra exhaustion, was out of breath, and had been scratched and scraped. The genin leader swore, "Who are you? You want some too? I don't think this would even be a fair fight by now, so why not hand the scroll to use and you might be spared your life," Naruto replied. The genin leader yelled, "No way in hell," as he charged Naruto. Naruto flipped away as the boy attempted to land a powerful blow, landing a forceful kick to the boy's ribs. There was a sickening crack that people nearby heard, and the boy screamed. Naruto punched the boy in the face, breaking his nose, and asked, "Hinata, does he have the scroll?" She said, a little alarmed by Naruto's brutality toward the boy, "No, it's the one on the right." Naruto turned to face the 2 surviving genin while grabbing the battered boy by the collar of his shirt. He smirked, but no one could see it, as he said, "Trade you." The boy swiftly retrieved the scroll from his pocket and threw it to Naruto. After catching the scroll, Naruto threw the boy back to his group and spoke. As he and Team 6 made their way to the tower, he said, "Oh, and never trust your enemy." Until they saw the explosive tags on their friends' backs, the sound crew didn't understand what he was saying. They clung to one another in their final moments together before being vaporized by the explosion. Akio remarked, "Naruto, that was cruel." As they continued to make their way to the tower, Naruto remarked, "So is this world. If I let them live, then they would have come after us when they had enough strength." His voice became a little softer as he asked, "How much farther, Hinata?" With her Byakugan active, Hinata remarked, "It's still quite a long way." And Naruto. They found a good spot for their camp, and Naruto said, "Okay then, let's make camp here. No one will be looking for a team this close to the entrances." Most of the animals had fled from the explosion. The proctors set up the trap, which the other genin teams assumed was intended to stun or simply slow down the teams. None of the other teams appeared to notice the larger than average white snake slithering through the forest in search of its prey as they began setting up camp. Hinata said, "Please Naruto-kun. Take me." Her clothes were long since thrown away, and she lay on Naruto's bed. Her fluids were glistening in the light, revealing her femininity. Her dreams were finally going to come true. She gritted her teeth as Naruto slowly made his way inside. She was a virgin, and the sensation of his member inside her was too much. At her barrier, she sensed him halting and asking in silence if it was okay. Hinata nodded, and he eased his way through her hymen by pulling out slightly and thrusting forcefully. Naruto thought he heard a laugh as he held his beloved in his arms, waiting for the pain to subside. He noticed the nine-tailed fox sitting behind him holding what looked like a bag of popcorn. The fox demon remarked, "Oh, don't mind me. I love watching these things." After staring and blinking a few times, Naruto awoke in his tent. "Really, Kyubi? Sensei, please don't ruin my dreams so you can guess Hinata's nude appearance at random. It's becoming annoying," Naruto told the demon in his mind. "Oh come on, it's so much fun to watch you go with it," the fox replied. "No, please stop now," he thought as he disconnected the connection and left his tent. As he did, he noticed that Hinata and Akio were just beginning to dismantle their tents. As Naruto began to follow suit, they heard a loud explosion and a high-pitched scream shortly after their tents were down and gone. Akio yelled, "What the hell was that?" Hinata remarked, "S's. Someone might be .be in trouble. Let's go, at the very least we can get some information on our enemies," said Naruto. In order to find the source of the noise, Team 6 leapt into the trees. Even Naruto was disgusted by what they saw when they arrived. The grass ninja who stood in front of Team 7 had half of her face burned off by Sasuke's Phoenix Flower Jutsu, revealing a snake-like eye with a purple ring around it. Then Naruto whispered, "Orochimaru, the snake Sanin." Fear paralyzed Akio and Hinata. The greatest traitor the Hidden Leaf Village had ever had stood just 20 feet ahead of them. He was the source of grown men's anxieties and children's nightmares. His deranged experiments were considered to be a thing of myth and legend. There weren't many people who had survived this man's fight. Naruto was aware of the man's superiority over Sasuke. Even with the fox's power, he didn't think he could defeat the man. He was prepared to try, though. Akio noticed the expression in Naruto's eye as he looked over at him. "You had better not be thinking what I believe you are, Naruto." Naruto glanced in the direction of his teammates. As he leapt over the bush and ran directly toward the white-skinned Sanin, he uttered the words, "Stay hidden, strike from the shadows." Orochimaru stood before Sasuke Uchiha, his target. As he sensed the strength of the jutsu, he laughed darkly. "Very impressive, Sasuke-kun. To be so young and hold this much power, I haven't seen anything like it since I was your age." The man skidded slightly across the ground as Naruto rushed from the side and delivered a powerful punch to his jaw, which neither of them saw. Naruto ran through some hand signals and yelled, "If you think Sasuke is strong, then I'm gonna blow you away, Snake Sanin," he exclaimed. "Wind style. Slicing breeze jutsu." Orochimaru gave the black-clad boy a sly smile. He could easily take the hit because the jutsu he was using wasn't very strong. Suddenly, a number of tiny, sharp stones appeared, and his eyes widened. Because the stones were so tiny, the wind could easily pick them up and launch them at great speeds, slicing through the Snake Sanin's skin. After giving Akio a silent thank you, Naruto continued to fight his opponent. But that idea didn't sit well with Orochimaru. He caused Naruto to leap away by disrupting the wind and blowing away the stones with his flared chakra. He said, hissing, "You little brat, I'm going to kill you." He extended his hands. Orochimaru yelled, "Ninja art." Striking shadow snakes. As a number of tiny poisonous snakes slithered out of his sleeves and made a lunge for Naruto. With haste, Naruto opened his swords and began slicing the snakes. Maintaining the chakra flow, Orochimaru used the ninjutsu he had previously cast on himself. He could taste the triumph on his lips, and his grin widened. The Sannin's neck stretched out, letting his head fly in his direction as Sasuke gaped in horror. As Orochimaru struck his target and sank his teeth into Sasuke's neck, he let out a painful howl. Orochimaru laughed as the cursed seal of heaven materialized on the boy's neck and he pulled away from it. As Sasuke's body throbbed and gave way under the strain, Sakura let out a scream. Orochimaru muttered, "You will look for me for the power, Sasuke-kun." They always do. Before two blazing hot blades were hammered into his shoulders, that is. Orochimaru had never experienced such agony. He heard laughter above him as he screamed and hit the ground. The legendary Snake Sannin, taken down by a mere genin. "I'm disappointed in you," Naruto exclaimed. Orochimaru laughed as he looked up at him. He faded into the ground as Naruto sliced where his head would have been, saying, "Oh stupid child. If I were trying my hardest, you wouldn't be standing. My goal here was Sasuke, and I got him. Have no doubt, we will have our match. Just not today." Sakura was sobbing and holding Sasuke close to her when Naruto turned to face her. Shaking his head, Naruto gave the order for his group to continue. He wasn't going to assist her if she was only going to sit and weep over Sasuke. Kiba might, but he wasn't sure. Naruto pondered the mark that had been on Sasuke's neck as Team 6 headed for the tower. Like the Sharingan when it was activated, it had 3 marks. He had a bad feeling that it would soon cause him trouble. Team 6 finally arrived at their door. Rapidly pushing it open, Naruto tore the paper indicating an authorized entry. Now that the pointless scavenger hunt was over, they could finally move on to the actual tests. At last, he would be able to demonstrate his abilities to everyone. He had no idea what would happen during the preliminary stages. Naruto and Team 6 had endured a tiring 3 days. Everyone was excited to begin the next section of the tests, but they had to wait for the other teams to pass. All of the tower's doors closed as the final team that might be able to pass entered, and everyone started to head for the arena. Naruto looked around the spacious room. The 9-tailed fox could fit inside it and still have some breathing room because it was large enough. The small observation deck and the lower floor were connected by 2 staircases. A stone statue of a hand sign with a big screen above it stood at the far end of the room. In the center of the arena, the genin and their jonin sensei stood in front of a sickly-looking man who said, in between coughing fits, "Hello everyone. My name is Gekko Hayate and I'm the proctor for this part of the exams. Now since so many passed the second exam, the Hokage has ordered a preliminary match be held," he continued. Before the nervous kids' cries of, "I'm going first," and "me first," broke out, there were a lot of words of excitement circulating through the genin crowd. As the screen came to life, displaying the names of the competitors before pausing on the 2 most startling names for the Konoha genin, Gekko remarked, "You don't decide the order, it's decided by the screen. Hinata Hyuga versus Neji Hyuga." Hinata was frightened and shocked for several reasons. She was going first, and Naruto would be watching her, but she was mostly shocked and afraid because she was fighting her cousin, who detested her with all of his heart. Before coughing once more, Gekko gave the order, "Will these 2 contestants stay on the floor while the rest go to the observation deck?" Just as the other genin found their position, Neji turned to face Hinata, who turned to face him. She fidgeted with her fingers while he gazed at her icily. Gekko yelled, "Begin," and then jumped back a little. With a voice full of hate, Neji asked, "Why are you here, Hinata? You're only holding your team back." Hinata muttered, "T. That's not T. True, it is. Tell me one time you were useful to your team. Tell me one time that you fought on your own without needing their help," he yelled. Since she hadn't done much so far, Hinata didn't say anything. Everything her cousin had said was now accurate. With harshness, Neji said, "You should just give up." The arena was suddenly filled with a loud bang. Slowly, everyone's gaze landed on Naruto as they searched for the source of the noise. He yelled angrily, "And who are you to tell her what to do? Go on, Hinata, show him what you can do." Neji laughed at what the boy had said. Before turning back to Hinata, Neji remarked, "A loser cheering on a loser, how pathetic." Hinata activated her Byakugan and slid slowly into the Hyuga fighting stance. As he slid into the stance with his Byakugan activated, Neji thought, her eyes, they don't hold any more doubt or fear, just who is that kid? As they charged at one another, he said, "Okay, you want to do this the hard way, we can do this the hard way." All they could see up in the stands was a flurry of attacks from both Hyuga, who were avoiding or blocking each other's blows. It resembled a stunning yet lethal dance. The Hyuga were feared in the ninja community because they could kill the target of one of those blows almost immediately if it struck a vital spot. Neji struck Hinata in the stomach, but she sidestepped it, and then he struck Neji in the shoulders, which he deflected. Neji leapt back, giving him time to gather his thoughts and devise a strategy. Hinata was a weakling, and he was incensed that she had actually kept up with him. How was she able to keep up with him? A master of the Hyuga. Neji was in better shape than Hinata. She couldn't continue fighting like this because she was much more out of breath even though none of his blows hit her. She paused to gaze upon Naruto, her love interest and inspiration. She coughed up blood when she suddenly experienced stomach pain. She had let her guard down, and Neji had seized the opportunity to attack. Neji continued to hit Hinata as she was healing from the initial blow, until she eventually leapt back and out of range before falling to the ground. Nearly everyone knew the fight was over. Gecko yelled, "Winner, Neji Hyuga." He was a little alarmed by the boy's potential cruelty toward his own family. But Hinata got up slowly. "It was destined that I win here today. You will never be good enough for a ninja life." Neji yelled at her. Hinata shook her head and said, "Why.uw? Wrong N Neji. D destiny had N. N. Nothing to do W. With it." Neji was furious. In the first place, he had won the match with a cheap shot, but even worse, Hinata was able to stand up and tell him that it wasn't fate. He was furious with her for saying that, but he wasn't sure why. He rushed at the girl in a fit of rage, intending to kill her with the next blow. Hinata closed her eyes tightly as she stood there, terrified, and then she heard a loud crashing sound followed by the sound of skin hitting skin. She opened her eyes slowly to find Neji embedded in the wall and Naruto's back in front of her. Naruto gave Neji a scowl. Before the events enacted in his mind, Neji asked, How did you?" Flashback. The Proctor and Jonin were stunned to a halt as Neji began his charge. But Naruto wasn't. He leapt over the railing and headed for Hinata and Neji. As he landed in Neji's path, he swiftly pumped chakra into his fist and slammed it into his face, sending him flying into the wall. End of flashback. Neji simply hung his head in embarrassment. He allowed his rage to control him. He would definitely get a lecture from Guy Sensei. However, everyone was taken aback by what Naruto said. After saying, "I'm not letting you hurt my mate," Hinata quickly passed out. Soon after, a medical team showed up and took both Hyuga to be treated. While Hinata had multiple serious injuries that required emergency care, Neji had a broken arm. As the screen sorted through the names, Gecko coughed. "Next match is Naruto Uzumaki and Kiba Inuzuka. Will you please come down to the arena?" Gecko replied. Before Kiba spoke, Naruto and Kiba looked at one another. "I'm going to kick your ass and show Hinata I'm way better than you, ya freak," he yelled. Gecko yelled, "Let the fight begin," and leapt away. Kiba couldn't have been more sorry about his taunt choice. As soon as the fight started, Naruto punched the dog boy in the face, causing him to roll backwards and leave a tiny trail of blood in his wake. Kiba's nose was obviously broken by Naruto's punch as he stood up. With his now broken nose in his hands, Kiba yelled, "What the hell was that?" But Naruto had no desire to converse. He wasn't going to allow his mate to be taken away, even if someone threatened to do so. He sprinted over to the boy and began kicking and punching him. Naruto continued his attack, giving Kiba no time to launch one. Naruto's right hook, which he avoided, changed into an axe kick from the same foot. He would be in big trouble if one of those hits came in. Naruto slammed an uppercut into the boy's jaw, saying, "Time to end this, Kiba." Naruto's hit sent Kiba flying through the air due to its force and speed. Naruto, however, was not finished yet. He leapt into the air after Kiba, but he passed the boy after pumping chakra into his legs. In anticipation of the moment, Naruto flipped himself over in midair and positioned himself on the ceiling. Kiba soon flew into his line of sight, and he seized the boy's sweatshirt collar. Before pushing off the ceiling and landing in the boy's stomach, Naruto let go, causing the boy to fall. As they both fell to the ground, Naruto locked Kiba in place with his arms. As the two boys fell toward the ground, the other Chunin hopefuls watched in awe. Naruto threw Kiba as hard as he could onto the floor just before they hit it. He exclaimed, "Naruto style. Uzumaki meteor," as a huge cloud of dust rose from the impact area. Naruto could be seen standing at the edge of a crater that was 3 feet deep as the smoke cleared. Kiba lay inside the crater, bleeding and bruised, probably with some broken bones. As he snatched up 2 more pills, Kiba wheezed, I'm not done yet." He threw one to his dog, who had leapt from the stands, and put the other in his mouth. Kiba's teeth became slightly sharper and his hand and foot nails grew longer as the dog's fur turned red. Kiba leaned over and crossed his fingers as the dog leapt onto his back and exclaimed, "Let's go, Akamaru." He yelled, "Beast Mimicry," as the tag team was encircled by a cloud of smoke. With a smirk concealed behind his mask, Naruto stood there. This was going to be a fascinating experience. Two Kiba were visible as the smoke cleared, but Akamaru was not. Both said, "Man-beast clone." In an attempt to finish the fight quickly, they both charged Naruto. However, if this technique was used for an extended period of time, it had unpleasant side effects. Another attack came from the same direction and slashed at Naruto's head as he was evading it. However, the outcome was not what he had anticipated. His hood's new seams were severed by the attack. The hood dropped to his back and chest, exposing his ears to the few foreign ninjas still alive, and it appeared to fall slowly for everyone. Even though everyone knew he was no longer human, he continued to fight. He discovered that the air was the only safe place as he continued to avoid Kiba and Akamaru's attacks. Naruto leapt swiftly into the air to get away from the two dogfighters, but that was their desire. They spun around and yelled, "Gotcha now! Man-beast jutsu! Fang over fang!" Everyone could only see two gray cylinders traveling directly toward the fox. Eared boy because they were spinning so quickly. There was a smoke explosion as Naruto touched down, but what everyone saw later was different from what they had anticipated. Everyone saw Naruto with both arms extended and two light blue objects blackening the path of fang over fang, while Kiba and Akamaru were spinning in place. Naruto uttered the words, "Plasma style. Plasma shield jutsu," as he unleashed his jutsu with such force that both of his opponents were smashed into the walls. Kiba stood up as they fell to the ground, and smoke billowed from Akamaru, who was rendered unconscious by the force of the impact and lay motionless. Kiba yelled, "What the hell did you do to Akamaru?" Naruto teasingly said, "It's not my fault your dog is weak, I apparently knocked him out." As he charged Naruto, Kiba yelled, "That's it, I'm going to finish you with my next move." "That'll show Hinata I'm right for her." He had forgotten what had happened at the beginning of the fight. Naruto hurried to the injured dog user's side. The next move was going to be the end of this fight. Kiba leapt to strike Naruto with his clawed hand, but he paused and began to charge his chakra instead. Kiba erupted into 6 more copies of himself just as he was ready to hit Naruto. The one Kiba was aiming for was struck and burst into smoke. Kiba was now positioned in the center of a 6 Naruto circle. Naruto and his clones raised their arms and declared, "Time to end this, Kiba." With his pride clouding his judgment, Kiba yelled, "Yay right, I'm not going to lose to you." Naruto exclaimed, "Plasma style. Strike of the lavender field jutsu," during the battle. Now, the attack would have been described by the same word from every girl in the room. It would be a lovely word. But according to the men in the room, it was the most destructive attack they had ever witnessed. His clones imitated Naruto's position as he held his hands wrist to wrist with the fingers pointing in opposing directions. Naruto's hands suddenly erupted into a huge lavender flower formed of the same colored plasma, striking Kiba in the center of his chest. Kiba was flung backwards into the same attack by the force behind it. For about 3 minutes, the procedure was repeated. Kiba would either sustain a burn or have some of his clothing burned away each time he was struck by the plasma flowers. 3 minutes later, Naruto and his 5 clones simultaneously released another wave of plasma flowers, causing an explosion that sent the dog boy flying around 12 feet away and rendering him unconscious. That was not only for thinking about taking Hinata from me, but it was also inspired by her dog breath. As he returned to his position, everyone stood in awe of the blonde boy's abilities. The strength of the boy's attack slightly surprised Gekko, who declared, "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki." One day, that jutsu would rank among the top 10 jutsus to be afraid of. As her student went back to his place, Kurenai said, "Naruto." Naruto uttered the words, "What?" She said, "We need to talk." "Fine." She looked at her student coldly and said, "It's about what you said about you and Hinata." Naruto was afraid of Kurenai for once. Kurenai's foot began tapping, and she said, "I'm waiting." She viewed Hinata as a daughter, and like any mother figure, she wanted to murder the person who might have caused her daughter to lose her virginity, even if her daughter was in love with it. Sweat began to trickle down his brow as he said, "W. Well you see, B.by, mate. I meant girlfriend." After scrolling through the remaining names behind them, the screen paused on Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. When Naruto heard the names being called, he realized it was pointless. Kurenai simply stared at him with a disbelieving expression. Naruto looked directly into Kurenai's eyes and said, "Kurenai. Sensei, I swear on my life I have not touched Hinata in a sexual way. I honor her too much to do such a thing. For almost 3 minutes, she looked into those eyes and found only honesty. She sighed at last. Alright Naruto, I believe you. But so help me, if you take her virginity before you two are married, I will make it rot and drop off. Naruto swallowed, as did many other men. They were all startled out of their respective kurenai, induced panics by Ino's abrupt scream. Ino questioned, How is that even possible? Sakura yelled as the two girls charged at one another, I'm not going to lose to you Ino. Pig. I'll prove to Sasuke that I'm better than you. The two girls withdrew their fists. Both fists made contact with their owner's opponent's jaws. Both girls flew backwards from the force of the hit and landed hard on the ground, unconscious. Gecko, a little miffed that the fight wasn't a fight, remarked, the fight is a draw. Excellent. As the names started to cycle, Gecko remarked, the next fight is Kintsuchi versus Shikamaru Nara. Will the two combatants please come down? Eager to prove herself, Kin smirked and leapt down from the balcony. When Akio saw the girl, his mouth fell open. He had never seen a more beautiful person. When Kabuto saw this, he grinned. Orochimaru would be happy to take advantage of the opportunity. He was just a single dead leaf village ninja away from demolishing his old home. Kin had thrown several senbon during this period, but Shikamaru swiftly avoided them, causing them to become embedded in the wall behind him. Naruto saw that a tiny bell was fastened to the end of one needle. She rang the bell behind Shikamaru as he went through what he thought was her plan. Shikamaru looked behind him, bewildered by the ringing, and saw the first senbon bell. Several senbon pierced his arms and legs as he turned his head back to Kin. Kin laughed as he fell painfully to the ground. As she pulled her hand back for another round of senbon, she said ominously, ask not for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. One thing struck her suddenly. She was unable to carry out her attack. Using a string to ring the bell that you threw first to confuse me and make me drop my guard. Not a bad idea, except, don't you find it odd that such a thin wire would cast a shadow at that height? Shikamaru replied with a grin on his face. When Kin realized, her eyes widened. Shikamaru straightened himself and declared, shadow possession successful. What now? Anything you do to me happens to you too. Smirked Kin as Shikamaru grabbed for his kunai, which caused her to follow suit. When he threw his kunai and she threw hers, she yelled, what are you doing? You'll kill us both, you idiot. Shikamaru swiftly threw his head back, missing the wall behind him by inches, and said, and now? Duck. But Kin knocked her unconscious by slamming her head against the wall. As he turned to leave, he remarked, a ninja must always know their position on the battlefield. It's troublesome, but it looks like I win. Winner Shikamaru Nara. Gecko declared as Kin's teammates leapt to her aid and carried her back to their balcony position. Akio, tell me how the rest of the fights go. I need to see Hinata. Naruto replied. He remarked, huh? Oh yay, sure thing. As Naruto made his way to the door. Naruto was escorted back to the village by a number of Anbu. Ignoring the villagers' fearful and hateful looks, he moved silently through the town on his way to the hospital. Akio back at the tower. Lee yelled, Leaf Hurricane, as he slammed Gaara to the ground and then fell to the ground. Gaara yelled, Mother will have your blood, as a huge tidal wave of sand burst from his gourd and raced in Lee's direction. Gaara crushed Lee's ankle and wrist bones to little more than splinters as the sand snaked around them. Even Madara Uchiha would wince at the scream Lee uttered. With Naruto, the nurse was too busy to notice who was requesting the information, so she simply told them the room as Naruto moved slowly through the hospital. In order to gain entry, Naruto knocked softly on the door. He was surprised when the door opened to reveal Hiyashi Hyuga sitting upright in her bed, blushing deeply, and wearing an apologetic expression as she stared at the boy and Hinata. Before the boy had a chance to answer his questions, Hiyashi drew Naruto into the room and said, Hello Naruto, have time to talk? You do? Great, let's talk. Hiyashi closed the door after surveying the corridor. So Naruto, she's your mate? He asked, giving the boy a fierce look. For his part, Naruto took the first action that came to mind. He screamed, Save me, Hinata. Chan, and plunged beneath the bed. The nurse was too busy to notice who was requesting the information, so she simply told them the room as Naruto moved slowly through the hospital. In order to gain entry, Naruto knocked softly on the door. He was surprised when the door opened to reveal Hiyashi Hyuga sitting upright in her bed, blushing deeply, and wearing an apologetic expression as she stared at the boy and Hinata. Before the boy had a chance to answer his questions, Hiyashi drew Naruto into the room and said, Hello Naruto, have time to talk? You do? Great, let's talk. Hiyashi closed the door after surveying the corridor. "So Naruto, she's your mate?" he asked, giving the boy a fierce look. For his part, Naruto took the first action that came to mind. He screamed, "Save me, Hinata-chan," and plunged beneath the bed. Hiyashi lunged at the fox boy as he did. Since the man was fully grown, it was not surprising that he was able to reach Naruto with his hand. However, he was only able to grab the boy's tail. "Ow, oh fuck, that hurts, put me down, put me down, put me down, please," the child yelled. Hiyashi's hold on him wasn't particularly gentle, and his tail was perhaps the most sensitive part of him. "Hell no, what the hell do you mean my daughter is your mate? I trust you to protect her and this is how you repay me," Hiyashi responded with a scream. "You f Fathera. It's not like that, I'm only 12 for Kami's sake." "What did you do to her, Father Page please?" "Nothing, you pervert." "Lies." Hinata's yell, "Enough father," set Naruto down now, startled both Naruto and Hiyashi, who had been staring at the ostensibly bashful heiress. "I said now." Hiyashi gave in and released Naruto. Before landing squarely on Hiyashi's face, Naruto hovered in midair for a few seconds, seemingly processing the fact that he had lost his grip. The response from Hiyashi was, "Oops." She blushed profusely and said, "Now, please, father, Naruto has done nothing of that nature." Naruto calmly rubbed his face and said, "Yay, mate, is the kitsune way of saying girlfriend, or boyfriend too, I guess. You happen to not think it out and heard the version implying that activity." Feeling a little embarrassed, Hiyashi said, "Pardon me, Naruto, father's reaction." Naruto showed his lack of concern by simply waving his hand. Moving to her side, Naruto said, "Hinata-chan, are you okay? Neji did quite a number on you during the prelims." Despite blushing a little more at his closeness, Hinata nodded. The doctors say LBR. Released in about a day or two. Naruto looked around the room, his cheeks slightly flushed. "That's good to hear, maybe when you were released we could, I don't know, maybe go out?" he asked. Hiyashi was sitting in a chair with a blank expression on his face, but that was only a front. The man behind it was doing everything in his power to keep the boy by his daughter's side from being strangled. Hinata gave a quiet, loud, "Yes," squealed with delight, and then fainted. Grinning, Naruto raised her sheets gently. He brushed a few hairs out of her face and turned to bow to Hiyashi, whispering, "I will see you then, Rebendaheim." He said, "Hiyashi Sama, I am afraid I must return to the prelims in order to analyze the competition." Then he vanished in a forest of leaves. Opening his eyes, Naruto saw Akio standing in the ring with a scrawny boy who had the Sound Village headband fastened securely to his forehead. The Sound Boy's arms were now stuck in the ground. "You think this little trick is going to stop me?" he yelled. Akio began running toward the boy. He slid across the floor and slammed his legs into the boy's trapped arms, saying, "Nope, just a trap for the finisher." The boy screamed in agony and then passed out, with a sickeningly loud snap. Gekko declared, "Winner, Akio Kiyoshi." Before leaping back into the stands and landing next to Naruto, Akio grinned and bowed to his unconscious opponent. It was Naruto who said, "Nice match." The sound of Naruto's voice made Akio jump. "Geez man, warn a guy next time will ya?" After shrugging, Naruto turned to face the ground. "Who fought?" Akio gestured toward the final Sound Ninja who had begun descending to the ring, saying, "Everyone but Choji and the mummy-looking guy over there." "Well, guess I'll have to train really hard to win, huh?" replied Naruto. Akio grinned as he and Naruto took each other's hands and said, "Ha, as if I'll pound you into the ground." As his friend made his assertion, Naruto grinned a little wider. "Maybe one day you will, Akio, maybe one day." The boy's attention was drawn to a loud explosion. With the Sound Ninja standing over him, a huge cloud of dust gradually dissipated to reveal Choji unconscious. According to Gekko, "Winner Dosu." Akio exclaimed, "Wow, that was fast." As Anko pulled out the box, Gekko remarked, "And that completes the preliminary rounds. Will all who are advancing please come down and draw a number from the box?" After heading down, each winner began drawing their number. Kakashi drew for Sasuke, and Guy drew for Neji. Naruto said, 1. Akio said, 5. Kakashi said, 3. 9. Dosu's voice was hollow. Kankuro cracked his neck and said, 6. 4. Gaara's voice sounded a little eerie, Guy said, remarkably composed for once, 2. According to Shikamaru, 7. Troublesome. Tamari turned to Shikamaru and said, 8. Gekko drew the matchups on a whiteboard and said, "Very well, the matches will be Naruto vs Neji in the first round. Sasuke vs Gaara follows. Akio vs Kankuro. Finally Shikamaru vs Temari, with the winner fighting Dosu afterwards. As everyone began to file out of the room, Gecko declared, "You have 1 month to train and learn new skills. Also keep in mind what your opponent showed here today. You are dismissed." As they walked, Akio put an arm around Naruto's shoulder. Naruto glanced at him and saw a grin that was a little naughty. "What?" inquired Naruto. "How's your mate doing?" Akio asked, laughing uncontrollably. Naruto let out a deep sigh. He simply had to use that word. With this, Akio was going to have a field day. On the other hand, Naruto smiled. "Fine actually, how's yours?" Akio began stuttering gibberish after blushing so much that he could have embarrassed Hinata. He was going to enjoy this for a long time, was he? Fireworks burst in the sky in stunning reds, blues, and greens. Thousands of people had gathered to watch the battles from the stands in the Leaf Village Stadium. Some for the wagers they had made, some for tradition. With the exception of 3 or 5 individuals, everyone who was present from the Leaf Village came to witness the demon's defeat by the Hyuga prodigy. There was a 200.1 chance that Naruto would win his fight. Naruto threw all of his money on him succeeding as his changed self after seeing those odds. Kurenai, Akio, and even timid little Hinata followed suit. If the requirement for a new training facility was any indication, they were all aware of Naruto's abilities. There was so much noise coming from the crowd that even the fox couldn't keep up with it. Genin filed into the stadium, followed by Genma Shiranui, as the crowd lowered their eyes to the stadium's center ring. This man was dressed in the typical Jonin attire of the Hidden Leaf Village, complete with a bandana for a forehead protector. When Genma exclaimed, "Welcome all of you to the final rounds of the Chunin exam," the audience erupted in cheers. The first match will be Naruto Uzumaki. Horrible cries of annoyance and animosity toward the boy broke out from the crowd. Versus Neji Hyuga of the prestigious Hyuga clan. The audience cheered once more, and you could hear multiple voices calling for the Hyuga male to kill the blonde. As the other genin made their way to the stadium, Genma asked, "Will those 2 genin stay on the field while the others go into the competitor's booth?" Sasuke was still nowhere to be found. Naruto didn't care. Gaara was his next target after Neji. "Alright. The match will end when one of you forfeits, is killed, or I deem you unable to fight." "Understood," replied Genma. The 2 boys gave a nod of agreement, and transitioned into their combat positions. Genma exclaimed, "Then let the first match of the final rounds begin," and leapt to a safe distance. Without wasting any time, Naruto charged the Hyuga boy and threw a right hook, but Neji ducked the blow by pulling his head back. With a sly smile, Naruto continued the punch, turning his foot and slamming it into Neji's head. Naruto wasn't finished yet, though. He was going to pay this man back for hurting the girl he loved. Naruto ran towards the boy and slammed his fist hard into the boy's stomach as Neji rolled on the ground from the force of his kick. Neji retreated 10 feet just from the blow. This loser's strength was astounding. He would need to put in all the effort and quit playing around if he wanted to win. Naruto said, "Give up, Neji, or I'll really get serious." Neji lowered himself into the stance and said, "There is no reason for me to do so. Fate has decided that I will win for you or within range of my 8 trigrams. It's impossible." From the stands, Hiyashi mused to himself, that technique shouldn't be accessible to a branch member. Neji roared, "Gentle fist art, 8 trigrams 60, 4 palms." Before launching himself forward, Neji yelled, 8 trigrams 2 palm. As he hit Naruto's chakra system twice, as he hit all of the important chakra points in Naruto's system, Neji yelled, 4 palm, 8 palm, 16 palm, 30, 2 palm, 8 trigrams 64 palm, and sent the boy hurtling back. "I'll admit, you gave me a run for my money. But it's over now. I struck all 64 of your chakra points. You're lucky that you're still breathing." Neji replied. Although Naruto had taken a few blows, he was able to recover quickly. Naruto slowly got back up and said, "Shut up, just shut up, Neji." Neji was taken aback. Although it wasn't a kill technique, it still dealt a lot of damage and typically left the victim stunned for a fatal blow, and no one in Hyuga history has ever been able to get back up after using it. How are you able to stand up? What drives you so much that you put your life on the line?" Neji gasped. "You want to know so bad, I'll tell you. The reason I fight so hard is for Hinata Chan. She is the world to me, and if someone hurts her, I will destroy them," Naruto said while staring at Neji. Naruto's stare made Neji feel afraid, but he shook it off. "What more can you do? You're struggling to stand and you can't use any of your jutsu now. It's over," Neji yelled. Using the fox's chakra, Naruto yelled, "It's not over until one of us can't get up Neji." Naruto sent a surge of chakra that Neji felt. Neji said smugly, "It's pointless, your chakra points are sealed." Naruto remarked, "You underestimate me Neji." Red chakra began to form at his feet. It's time to put the skills I acquired to use. If one were to ask a Hyuga what transpired during that battle, they would say that Naruto filled his system with red, nearly malevolent chakra after sealing his points. Its power opened all the chakra points that were sealed. The demon child released a chakra so strong that the loose dirt surrounding the stadium was lifted up around the boy, and the chakra itself surrounded the boy like fire, according to any civilian. How could this boy have so much power? Neji was afraid. The members of Neji's generation were unaware that the fox had been imprisoned. Terrified, Neji said, What is going on here? How can you hold so much power?" He had never experienced such hatred and power in his life. Naruto slammed his hand on the ground and yelled, "You will find out soon enough Neji, plasma style. Plasma eruption jutsu." The ground beneath Neji began to crack a few seconds later, and then a column of pale blue light erupted around Neji. A terrible scream echoed through the stadium. People could see Neji as the beam began to go out, his skin red and irritated, his clothes singed. Nice trick Uzumaki, but it'll take more than that to beat me," Neji replied. As he charged at the other boy, Naruto remarked, "I was hoping that was going to be the case." Neji stood there, his smirk concealed by his hair. Naruto felt resistance to his next punch, as if something were pushing it away, even though it appeared to have struck its target. Neji then began to spin, sending Naruto hurtling off in the process. Naruto used his momentum to flip over and skid on his feet. Naruto questioned, "What the hell was that?" "I'll give you credit, Naruto. Nobody has ever come this close to defeating Neji, but nobody is able to overcome his strongest defense. The 8 trigrams palm rotation allows him to repel attacks as well as block them by concentrating chakra from his body's chakra points and spinning quickly," a girl in the stands remarked. This girl was Neji's teammate Tenten. Neji slid back into his stance and remarked, "That is my ultimate defense Naruto, no one has broken through it." As he charged forward once more, Naruto yelled, "Well, we will see about that, won't we?" Neji grinned once more and resumed his rotation, but Naruto grinned and leapt away from the dome. His smile widened as he watched the dome spin. Focusing his chakra, he let one hand drop to his side. In his hand, a pale blue sphere began to slowly take shape. The fact that Naruto had learned the 4th Hokage's jutsu shocked the 3rd Hokage and numerous other senior ninja, many of whom were experiencing financial hardship. With a shout of Rasengan, Naruto pushed the orb into the dome. It appeared for some time that neither side would compromise. In an attempt to push the other out of their way, the Rasengan grinded against the rotation. Before the Rasengan began to slow down and Neji's spin began to lose momentum, the power struggle lasted for at least 2 minutes. With a quick thought, Naruto formed another Rasengan and dropped his other hand back. Naruto slammed his second Rasengan into Neji's stomach just as the first one and the rotation were dying down. Naruto yelled, "Eat this Neji! Rasengan!" As the boy flew back into a wall as the full force of his Rasengan was unloaded into Neji's stomach. The pain from the attack was unbearable as Neji struck the wall and collapsed onto his back. Neji said, I don't think I can move. But how? Fate had decided I would win." Genma exclaimed, "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki," to the assembly. The audience, which had been quiet during the altercation, burst into applause for the blonde. Genma grinned at the boy, who was a very good ninja. Neji gazed up at the heavens. As Neji pondered, "Father, why can't I be free?" Genma glanced at the sky before turning to face Neji. "You know, even a caged bird will never give up its freedom. Even if it's locked up it'll try to pick the lock with its beak, never giving in to a cruel fate." Neji just looked away and began to think about what the older man had said. Naruto glanced up at Hinata's location. "Hinata-chan, I succeeded. Exactly as you requested. The next match will be Sasuke Uchiha vs Gaara of the Desert." The audience erupted in cheers as Genma spoke. To watch the Uchiha battle the Kage's son, a large number of people traveled from neighboring villages to the Leaf. But as soon as Gaara was the only person in the ring, with sand all over his feet, the cheering quickly stopped. Genma was abruptly approached by an Anbu who whispered something in his ear. Genma acknowledged the information with a slight nod of his head. There has been a change of plans. The fight between Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Desert will be pushed to the last spot. A lot of people began to yell and boo. Those who didn't were already practicing ninja, and they were aware that Sasuke's presence was the only reason it was postponed. "Please be patient. We assure you that the fight will resume following the other fights. Rather, Akio Kiyoshi will face Konkuro of the Desert in the upcoming bout. Would you kindly invite the genin to the arena? All right. I finally have the opportunity to shine, Akio pondered eagerly. Proctor, I wish to withdraw from the match. Konkuro's tone was a little dejected. Although he already dipped his puppet's weapons in poison for the invasion, he would have loved to battle and destroy that little brat. The medics would detect the traces in his blood and notify the Hokage if he had physically assaulted the child. Then their surprise attack would be over. So be it. Konkuro of the Desert has withdrawn from the exams. Akio Kiyoshi wins by default. To the astonishment of the onlookers, Genma said. Hey, that is bullshit. Akio yelled. I didn't come this far just to be handed a win because my opponent forfeited. I'm sorry Akio, but it is his decision to make, Genma said. Akio just balled his fists and glared at Konkuro. He, along with the Hokage and a few other senior ninja, was aware of their strategy. He was still determined to beat Konkuro to death. His house was not in danger. Or the people he cared about. Kin, meanwhile, had already begun to count the Sound and Sand troops dressed as Leaf Anbu. They currently outnumber the Leaf 3-1. She began to question whether the Leaf could actually withstand this assault. With Konkuro withdrawing, the next match will be Shikamaru Nara versus Tamari of the Desert, Genma declared. He was unable to continue as Tamari came down from the competitor's booth due to the sudden gust of wind. I'm not scared of these other genin, bring him on, I said, she said. Difficult. Perhaps I should also give up. Shikamaru pondered, before he glanced at Genma, that is. There was a message in the look he was giving the boy. We need the time, so compete. With a sigh, he headed for the arena's stairs. The audience applauded as he walked slowly toward his opponent. At last, they witnessed some combat. The next round, Shikamaru Nara versus Tamari of the Desert will now begin. As he leapt away, Genma yelled. Wind style. Wind scythe jutsu. Tamari swung her enormous fan and yelled. She produced dull blades that only knocked Shikamaru back into the trees because she wasn't putting as much chakra into the jutsu. As she swung her fan once more, she yelled, Don't think I'm going to give you time to think lazy. Boy. The trees protected Shikamaru from the more painful winds because she maintained the same chakra output. How am I going to accomplish this? Shikamaru pondered. He inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Then he had a thought. He merely hoped that doing this wouldn't result in his death. Did Tamari really kill that child? She stopped swinging her fan. No, she couldn't have. Why was she upset, and why were the attacks so weak? With a kunai in each hand, Shikamaru rushed out of the trees and made his way directly to Tamari. Upon witnessing the lazy boy move so quickly, Tamari automatically swung her fan vigorously in an attempt to throw him off balance and back into the trees. Shikamaru dug his kunai into the ground and lay flat on his stomach as the wind slammed into him. He lunged at Tamari and tackled her to the ground as the breeze subsided. As Shikamaru launched his attack, the crowd cheered, and the two children rolled on the ground, kicking up dust as they did so. When they lost vision, the cheering ceased. It was much more action-packed than they had anticipated, and everyone was on the edge of their seats. Shikamaru and Tamari were visible to the entire village in the arena, with Shikamaru on top of her and their lips pressed together as the dust gradually cleared and the male audience began to whistle and catcall. In his defense, making out with his opponent in that way wasn't his intention, but it did enable his shadow to connect with hers. Both of them rose slowly, Tamari's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Tamari threw her fan aside as Shikamaru threw his blade away from him. You perverted bastard. I said, she said. Shikamaru answered, that was entirely by accident, honest. Tamari simply glared at him. She wouldn't have done anything if she had been in charge of her body. I'm sorry, okay. Troublesome woman. He made a point. You should give up right now. Your body is entirely under my control. He demonstrated his point by waving his arm, which caused her to follow suit. How could I lose to this guy? Damn it. I must add that he stole my first kiss. In her mind, she was furious. Page's proctor. Tamari yelled. Yes. The older man answered. Tamari of the Desert. Admit defeat to Shikamaru Nara. Yes, she said reluctantly. Very well. Victory goes to Shikamaru Nara of the Leaf Village. As the audience cheered, Genma made the announcement. Despite the fact that their opponent had won the match, two people were not applauding. I'm gonna kill that bastard for what he did to her, Konkuro shouted. With the urge to see his blood paint the ground growing inside of him, Gaara remained silent and simply gazed at the slothful genin. Genma gave the young, slothful boy in front of him a smile. Another Leaf Genin came forward. His house was holding up well. In an attempt to buy more time, he allowed the cheers for the young Nara to keep coming in. The applause soon died down, though, and was replaced by shouts of, "Where is Sasuke?" and "Send out the Uchiha," along with numerous other cries that were too dispersed and muffled by one another to be heard clearly. A huge cloud of smoke burst into the center of the arena as Sarutobi was ready to declare Sasuke's forfeit. "Sorry, are we late?" Kakashi inquired over the smoke. "A little. Bit of a flashy entrance, don't you think?" In reply, Genma asked. "Oh, little Sasuke just wanted to make a grand entrance." Kakashi made a joke. When the sand began to flow violently around him, Gaara finally had enough of waiting and made his way to the center of the arena. Without uttering a word, Sasuke simply grinned at the redhead and moved into a fighting stance. Genma's throat cleared. And finally, the bout you've all been anticipating. Sasuke Uchiha vs Gaara of the Desert. Start. In an attempt to take advantage of the redhead's slowness, Sasuke charged Gaara. Who just stood there. Sand flew in the direction of the boy as Sasuke approached. Sasuke barely avoided the sand as he leapt to the side. He was aware of its strength and vowed not to become like Lee. Knowing full well that they would be blocked, the final Uchiha proceeded with his charge, hurling shuriken and kunai at the boy. The sand rose as he had predicted, easily deflecting the weapons. With his eyes obscured by the sand, Sasuke took the risk and shot directly at the red head. The wall of sand lunged towards Sasuke, pushing him back a few inches before he was within range. He had to flip back as soon as he landed from his jump to avoid the waves of sand that Gaara was sending after him. When Sasuke was within a few feet of the wall, Gaara stopped chasing the waves of sand, deciding against going for a quick kill in favor of pulling his sand back. Gaara's face lit up with a sick smile. He desired to inflict pain on his adversary. Sasuke also grinned. If his opponent had been weak, there would have been no fun. He began racing around the ring, accelerating gradually until he was barely perceptible, getting closer to Gaara with each turn. A feeling of fear rose within Gaara. He wanted to avoid the damage that speed like that could do to his person. "No, don't come. Don't come. Leave me alone." Sending a huge shockwave of sand in all directions, he yelled. Gaara didn't care to enjoy his opponent's pain now that Sasuke had demonstrated his speed. No, he posed a threat, and he would eliminate it completely. Sasuke was shocked by how quickly the sand spewed out. He believed that the sand could only move at the one speed that Gaara initially displayed. Sand was encircling Sasuke's legs because he was unable to avoid it in time. The boy then screamed in agony as Gaara lifted him off the ground and slammed him against the wall, causing the crowd to gasp in several places. Gaara, however, was not finished yet. He repeatedly slammed the stranded boy into the trees, bringing them down one by one. The audience flinched with every blow the Uchiha delivered, seemingly sensing the boy's suffering. Gaara's smile returned with every cry that reverberated in his mind. He was having fun with his new toy. When he smashed it against objects, it made such fun noises. He shouted, "Is that all you have to offer me?" He exclaimed, "Such a shame, I expected more from you," and then threw the Uchiha against the wall, getting him out of the sand. It was just what he required. He could now execute his hand seals with ease since he was no longer affected by the drastic changes in force brought on by the violent swinging. Instead of being reduced to a mere rag doll, he was finally able to mount a more effective defense. Fire Style. Grand Fireball Jutsu. As he completed the hand seals, Sasuke yelled and threw a big ball of fire out of his mouth. To protect himself from the irritation, Gaara simply raised his sand. Sasuke capitalized once more. He ran directly behind him and kicked the boy in the back with such force that he glided a little. It was his moment to take charge now. Fire Style. Phoenix Bomb Jutsu. Several bursts of fire shot in Gaara's direction as Sasuke yelled. It was blocked by the sand once more, but it appeared to be moving more slowly. In order to avoid getting impaled by sand tendrils, Sasuke flew to where the redhead was about to land and then leapt back. The tendrils encircled Gaara, creating a dome around the boy, as soon as he was out of reach. This Uchiha was going to die. He had had enough. Sasuke grinned. It was time to use his most recent method. After sprinting up the stadium wall, Sasuke turned to face his opponent. Grabbing his wrist, he knelt down and ran through some hand signals. A chirping sound gradually became audible. At first, it was just 2 or 3 birds conversing with one another. Then it got louder and louder until the whole place was filled with the sound of 1,000 birds. Sasuke dashed toward his opponent, running down the wall. As he approached the dome of sand, he withdrew the lightning, covered fist. In an attempt to impale the boy, more sand tendrils erupted. Sasuke swerved through them without slowing down. He yelled, "Chidori!" before reaching into Gaara's body through the sand. Gaara had a fresh sensation. Sliding down his chest was something moist. "What is this?" he asked himself. It was warm. "Is this blood?" he asked. Blood? Blood." He let out a scream. When his voice reached the crowd, it was tinged with fear. "Oh no, Gaara's hurt," Tamari said anxiously. "Shit, that's not good," Konkuro answered. The sand dome began to swell with activity and then burst, exposing a hideous red head. Some of his teeth had sharpened like the demons in stories, and sand seemed to have blended into his skin. He had lost the light blue pupils in his eyes. Rather, they had turned gold, and the whites of his eyes had gone black. The skin appeared to have been ripped from where the sand merged in a number of places on Gaara's body. Sasuke felt frightened. Feathers began to fall from the air before the crowd began their inevitable panic. The civilians had no chance against the genjutsu, which was immediately apparent to almost all of the ninja. An enormous explosion erupted from the cage's box just as the crowd had gone to sleep. As they looked up, all of the Leaf Ninja were concerned about their cage. They observed Orochimaru clutching his erstwhile instructor while pressing a kunai against his neck. He yelled, "Attention Leaf Village Ninja! Your village is going to disappear today. Therefore, I advise you to embrace destruction." Orochimaru yelled and then burst out laughing.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.